Okay, good afternoon. Welcome everyone to the September 21st, 2022 meeting of the Murfreesboro Planning Commission. We'll call the meeting to order. We do have quorum present today. First item of business is our consent agenda, which we've all had a chance to review ahead of time. Did anybody have any of these items they would like to have removed for any further discussion?
If there are none, I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second on the consent agenda. All in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, next, our GDO section of our agenda. Our first item is Puckett Creek Station Lot 9. The Stanley Chiropractic is the final design and site plan review of a 4,916 square foot medical office on 1 acre, zoned commercial highway and GDO 1, located along Cedar Glades Drive. Stanley Chiropractic is the developer. Good afternoon, Ms. Green.
Good afternoon, Mrs. Jones and Planning Commission members. Our first item this afternoon in the gateway portion of our agenda is for you to consider final design review and site plan approval for Lot 9 of the Puckett Creek Station master plan area. You can see on the screen an ortho photo of the site. It currently has frontage along Cedar Glades Drive as a public right-of-way. And that second access point is a private drive, and it'll have access to that as well. This site is located within the Puckett Creek Station master plan that previously had a reserved future development area. Several months ago, a revision was made to that master plan to create additional lots, including this lot 19 that we're looking at. And so there is a preliminary plat and a final plat for this property. The site itself is, of course, located in the Gateway Design Overlay District with a base zone of Commercial Highway District. And so the use is permitted, the medical office use is permitted in both the underlying zone and in the overlay zone. The site is designed with the possibility of a building expansion in the future if so desired. The owner has indicated that this building is more than sufficient to meet what he believes his need will be for the next 5 or 10 years, but because the site is a little bit larger, they wanted to lay it out so if there was a desire in the future to do a building addition, they could do that. The building is just under 5,000 square feet, which is rather large for a chiropractic office. The site itself, of course, received initial design review approval last month for the architecture of the building, and I do have the material sample board. We passed that around last month, and you're welcome. I'll be happy to pass that around to you again. The civil team have been able to address the majority of our landscaping, engineering, and site comments. Most of the comments that remain are those standard comments that we make that are prior to building permit or prior to certificate of occupancy, just making sure that we have the documentation that we need for permitting. Mr. Matt Taylor is here representing the site if you have any questions for him. Otherwise, staff's recommendation is that you approve this subject to all staff comments.
Okay, any questions or comments from the Planning Commission?
If there are none, I move for approval with all staff comments.
Second.
Motion and seconds. All in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Next, we have the Ascension St. Thomas parking garage final design and site plan review of a 300,000 square foot parking structure on 68.5 acres zoned light industrial, GDO 3, and PSO located along Medical Center Parkway. Middle Tennessee Medical Center, Inc. is the developer. Ms. Green.
Thank you again. Our next item is for you to consider final design review and site plan review approval for a project to be located within the Ascension St. Thomas Medical Plaza. This, of course, was originally called St. Thomas Rutherford, but it's, I think, changed ownership and name several times. On the screen, you can see the approximate location of the project. This site is mostly developed, and at this stage, they're proposing to remove some 194 parking spaces to create a multi-level parking structure that'll be for approximately 1,000 parking spaces, and that is this area here. The parking structure is anticipated to be used by folks who work at the hospital, so it could be doctors, employees, staff, the various types of individuals who work there. It's not anticipated to be available to the general public. By relocating the staffing to this structure, they believe that will open up some of the surface parking that's closer to the entrances where they see a need for them, either in the medical office buildings or in the hospital itself. As you know, through the years, there have been several modifications to the Ascension St. Thomas project, and so we've asked them to consistently update their plan and make sure that with these additions, expansions, modifications, they're still allocating the needed open space and formal open space, still able to manage their stormwater management areas, including those in the design. So our comments were reflective of that, and we did want to ensure that those elements were being added. You did consider the item for initial design review last month, and you can see there, and it was approved with initial design review. Two of the materials, the stone and the brick, are the same materials that are on the existing structure, and then a few of the materials are different. They were able to modify the landscape plan to screen the ramps leading into the parking garage, which is one of our GDO requirements. Previously, they had landscaping beside the entrances, but not in front of the entrances to screen them from our major arterials, and so that has been added with this plan. The plan delineates all parking spaces with painted lines. We believe that the exterior design is architecturally harmonious with the development, and the perimeter of the decks are screened at grade level so you don't look inside and see the vehicles, so you can see there areas of stone and void or no wall, and so that helps screen the buildings inside there. The site is Zone Light Industrial District and located within the GDO 3, Gateway Design Overlay District 3. It would be required after you make your decision today regarding the plans. If it's approved, it will be required to go to the DRC to receive final design review approval from them, and they will integrate any of the comments that they've made here. The majority of the staff comments have been addressed with these plans. There were some outstanding lighting comments that I spoke with the design team about yesterday, particularly adding lighting along the sidewalk that leads you from the structure to the site. And so they weren't able to update the photometric plan before today, but I did get a letter on the letterhead from the contractor committing to installing the lighting to meet our minimum safety standards there. So we believe that the plans are in relatively good order, and our recommendation, staff's recommendation, is that you approve them subject to all staff comments.
Okay, any questions for Ms. Green?
Just one, I don't think we discussed this the last time, but we're adding a lot of parking and we're eliminating parking during the construction period. What are we doing to satisfy parking during that time?
So during the construction period, they this is off-site. It's owned by Ascension St. Thomas. It's not constructed to meet the gateway standards. It's considered a temporary parking area. If you look at it, you can see it looks different. If you see it from the road, you can tell that something's not quite right with it, and that's because it is designed as a temporary parking lot, and that's something that the Planning Commission had looked at, I think, a couple years ago. So that temporary parking lot currently provides parking for staff, not visitors. And I had been told, I haven't confirmed it with my own eyes, that they provide transportation from that site to the building to get employees that they need to get faster over. There's also some parking along the roads, which really doesn't really meet our minimum standards either, but that's a temporary measure that our administration department approved, saying that they could use that parking on the ring road or park on the side of the ring road through the construction process to help mitigate some of the impacts. I think that there will certainly be inconveniences with the parking, but we've looked at ways of temporarily allowing something that we normally would not allow to help ease that. They're also, in all the construction phases, including the one you're going to see next, they have an existing material storage and staging area. They're going to use that same storage and staging area for all phases of construction, so they don't have to add additional construction laydown areas. Their goal, and they've said to me that they'd like to do, I think, right on time delivery, so materials come right when they need it. The staff sort of pushed back at that and said, we understand that's your goal, but you still need to plan for, trees if they come a little bit early, or construction materials. And so they've identified the existing laydown area as that area. Is there something that the applicants can answer for you regarding that?
No, I just wanted to make sure we're not going to be at a hindrance. So it looks like it's planned for, so.
I do think it'll be inconvenient for some time, but I think this garage is much needed.
Yeah, thank you. If
And
not-
how many spaces are in the garage?
The plan says approximately 1,000. There are 194 there, and so they're gaining a little over 800.
Okay.
If there's no other questions, I'll move for approval, subject to all staff comments.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Next, we have the Ascension St. Thomas ICU addition. This is initial design review of a 54,747 square foot addition on 68.5 acres, zoned light industrial, GDO 3 and PSO, located at 1700 Medical Center Parkway. Middle Tennessee Medical Center, Inc. is the developer. Ms. Green.
Thank you. This next project is also for the Ascension St. Thomas Hospital. We've lost our TVs, I guess. Can you all still see the screens? Okay. It's a separate project with separate contractors than for the parking garage, but of course it's to serve the hospital. The map that you have on the screen shows the property zone light industrial district and gateway design overlay district 3, GDO 3. This is the initial design review for the project, so the primary focus of initial design review is architecture, and for you to provide any feedback to them or direction, or of course any direction you have about the site. So when they come back for final design review, it might go as smoothly as the previous two items did, because you really do a lot of the work at initial design review. The Ascension St. Thomas, of course, is located at 1700 Medical Center Parkway. The hospital has several construction projects underway, and we've talked about those, including the multi-level parking structure. This project is for the expansion of an intensive care unit, and it creates an ambulatory waiting area on the ground floor, so there's open space on the bottom of the addition, and you'll see that in a minute, where some of the ambulances can be. The total square foot of this expansion is 54,747 square feet. The first floor expansion is 27,210. The second floor is 13,075. And the third floor is 14,462 square feet of expansion area. This existing development, of course, is the hospital, and it currently complies with our Gateway Streetscape Master Plan. And then we've also asked them to, again, look at that formal open space and open space as they expand the building and expand into these areas which were considered open space before, or formal open space. Their calculations show that they are still meeting the standard, and they're also dedicating an additional or a relocated area of formal open space. And then, so this is the approximate area of the expansion. I'm going to give you the material board and come back to the lectern. The existing hospital is 9 stories, which is 140 feet. The proposed addition is 3 stories. Let me pull up this, I think it's a good image. The design of the proposed addition does incorporate 3 colors of brick, and the base of the building is the Aeroscraft smooth stone with a rock face maple along the roof line. The roof itself is flat with metal coping, and you can see that a substantial amount of the rooftop mounted equipment is proposed to be screened with metal screens. We have some standards in our GDO and in our design guidelines that we ask new construction to meet. This building is asking for some consideration as an infill development for those standards, and so, for example, the roof should have variations in the roof plane, undulations in the wall plane to create shadow lines and dimension, and the design guidelines say that you cannot have more than a 2-story differentiation in height, and so with the 9 stories and 3 stories, you do have more than that. But the design guidelines do talk about an infill project, and it specifically defines an infill project. It says the key to defining project as infill is determined by the existence of a strong existing pattern already established by surrounding development on all sides. Design guidelines standards specifically say that flexibility can be granted for infill development if it fits the definition. And so I went through some of our standards and just identified them. The hospital exists, and this is in addition to the hospital, so I think obviously it would qualify as an infill development since it's in addition to that, and we would want it to be a cohesive design with existing building rather than having an awkward design that might not fit in. And so some of the things that I identified that you may want to look at is that, and then I copied from the design guidelines, is that consideration should be given to the scale, palette, and texture of existing buildings. And the exception that can be given is that some specific buildings, due to their use, location, or importance to the community, may be monumental in scale and set apart from neighboring structures. So you may consider this the hospital due to its importance to the community. The 9 stories, you may allow that difference in height. We also say that you have to avoid long planar design with no breaks in the roof line or front wall, and so the building entrances may be recessed from the established setbacks while the building facade is still visible. And so this building has a main entrance already, and so it may be that the way the building is designed is okay since it's really in addition to the side of the building that's not very visible. And so exceptions that can be given is to height and setback requirements when addressing renovations of existing buildings or when dealing with infill. Another exception that can be granted is to these requirements may be considered when addressing renovations of existing buildings. You can consider the scale as viewed from vehicular roadways, and this is set back quite a distance from the public right-of-ways. It's basically in the center of the site. Or consider the scale of buildings relative to nearby structures, which of course is one of the things that we're talking about. Some of the guidelines that are given for infill is that the building facade should incorporate design elements which balance the overall appearance. Symmetry is not required, but extreme variation should be avoided. And so they're attempting to incorporate the same symmetry with the windows, and the design of the windows are similar to what's on the existing hospital. And repeated elements may be utilized to establish a pattern of rhythm to the facade. Another guideline is that the design of the facade should result in an authentic appearing structure with dimensions and spans of visible materials relating to actual structural properties. And so you can give exceptions when considering, of course, infill. Some of the guidelines are that materials should be chosen, should be the same materials used on neighboring structures, which they are. A palette of materials should be established for all projects, which you have the material board. Developments with multiple buildings may have multiple palettes. However, the individual palettes should be coordinated for some shared materials, and materials should be durable and sufficient quality. And this is brick, so it would be considered durable. Another guideline is that you're to provide variations in roof heights and pitches to add interest. This roof is relatively flat, and staff did ask if they could raise the parapet to screen the rooftop equipment as opposed to this screen wall. But they really think that the best design, considering the use of this building and maybe the potential future use, is to use that screen wall. And I think mentioned that the expense of creating a parapet in lieu of the screen wall would be significant, and so I know they'll want to come speak to that. And so there are some changes in the wall plan you can see with the canopy and the drive-under ambulatory area. It does provide some design criteria. This is, of course, near the helipad. Let me take you through some other images just real quick. And then there's some site changes. I really think that first image does a good job of conveying the scale and proportions to the building. So I'll invite this design team up to go through the building and provide some additional information to you. They really know this project much better than I do and can really explain everything to you. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them, and I'll grab that material board so they can use it for their presentation. Who would like to hold it?
I can hold it.
Okay.
Good afternoon. My name is Clint Harris. I work with Gresham Smith. I was the architect for the project, or I guess currently am the architect for the project. I'm happy to walk through any of this as you wish, or if there's questions specifically that I can help answer, I'd be glad to start there as well.
Anybody have specific questions before we kind of walks through it?
Maybe a question regarding the metal screening?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So to kind of precursor that, as you all may know very well, Gordon Ferguson, the CEO of the hospital, is very intent that this addition and any addition usually on the hospital that he is currently presiding over matches exactly, almost looks as if it were part of the original design. And so that's what we were tasked with at that time. And so that's why the materiality, the patterning, the depth changes on the brick facade are all exactly as it was originally designed on the hospital campus that's there now. And that's why it looks as it does to match that existing campus design. The screening is a result of it being an ICU. It is a significant HVAC and exhaust need in those spaces on that second floor and potentially the third floor as well, which is a shell space right now. So the HVAC is significant at that time. The screening, if we were to move it out to the parapet, as Ms. Margaret Ann had suggested, it would potentially double or potentially 2.5 times the amount of screening that we would have to add to the project cost, as well as the potential that I don't think was mentioned is that this can grow. It's being structured to be able to match the same height as the hospital, should the hospital decide that it needs further growth in the future. So this is currently just a step in that process, or a phase in that process, with no estimated timeline of when that would happen. So the screening allows us a little bit more flexibility in being able to grow that in the future and be able to remove it in an easier way for that future growth. The screening also, it's kind of hard to see this since this is a rendering, but the screening is matching the screening that is around the campus as well. There is mechanical screening on the towers as well as the lower levels of the hospital around the campus that exists now. We are matching the exact same material that's being used there. I think it's a rather kind of beige white on the tower, and then at the back end there's an MMD space at the back that also has screening, and it matches the same ones that's there now. So again, identifying what's there on campus that has been approved before and matching that exactly.
But according to this rendering, the screening that's there currently is on the back of the building, not so much the medical center facing side. I guess my concern is this side appears to be much more medical center visible.
Yes, no, you're correct. That front portion that, I don't know if I'm able to point on here.
There is screening up on the top side.
Oh, there we go. There is ooh, gracious, I apologize. There is, you would think that I use a computer all day long, but don't know how to use this right here. So there is screening up on the tower here. We are obviously having to add screening here because we are a lower building. We have to mask that. The screening on the back side that you're seeing there is those 2 dots back there. Again, I know you're talking about the front, but just to clarify. And then we're matching screening that already exists in those dots as well, which there was another color I could choose. So again, we recognize that it is towards the front of the building, but adding the screen wall to the exterior would severely make it more difficult to grow in the future, as well as add substantial cost to the project to move it out to the parapet to again screen the same materials that we are now.
Yeah, I totally understand being able to build, I mean, the hospital's been expanded a couple times already. I'm not so sure at 3 full stories up how much of that you're really going to see anyway, even at a distance from that far. I don't know how much of that you're going to see anyway from the ground.
Well, I think you're going to see it from medical center because it's only 3 stories.
That's pretty offset, and there's a bunch of trees up and down through there too.
I will say we did do some studies of this. I don't know if they're in this package. We did review that. We knew this would be a topic of discussion. Medical Center Parkway is heavily landscaped with significant growth out there to where seeing the hospital itself is challenging most times. We also did it from inside the parkway, inside the campus lot as well, to try and see it. Obviously, there is some areas you will see this. We're not denying that. But that the visibility from Medical Center Parkway is severely decreased because of the vegetation that's already there on the campus.
the height of the screening dictated by the equipment?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Is it significant? It's about twice the size of the screening on the main tower.
So I apologize, I couldn't hear
Looking
that.
at the screening on the main tower, it looks to be about twice the size of the screening.
It's currently sitting at 10 feet above the roof because the mechanical unit itself is 10 feet above the roof. So we made sure that there wouldn't be any visibility of that unit. The height of the tower screen wall, I don't know off the top of my head, but it is, I mean, standing up there, it is above my head when I stand up there on top of the tower. So I know that it is probably at least somewhere between 7 and 10 feet up on top of the towers as well that face Medical Center Parkway. As the tower grows as well in the future, when that should happen, obviously screening will be reduced because of the visibility and perspective of that as the tower grows.
Margaret Ann, can you touch on this addition being smaller than we would usually require? I know you mentioned that and I jotted it down, but I was still really focused on the screen.
Yeah, sure. The design guidelines say that, let me find it so I don't misquote it, that there shouldn't be more than a two-story difference between buildings that are adjacent or connected to each other. And so, okay, adjoining building is 9 stories and proposed structure is 3 stories, creating more than 2-story differentiation in height. And so because that does not comply with the design guidelines, you could, that's not an ordinance requirement. You could determine it's infill and be okay with it, or you could say that they need to move in a direction to meet that standard. But it's the design guidelines, not the GDO, that say no more than 2 stories. And
Okay. Thank you.
this isn't.
Oh, real quick. So if they moved it up where it was adjacent to the 1-story part, then it would be okay? But it's, if you look at that picture, there's a 1-story portion of the hospital in front of the 9-story portion. So if they moved it up, would it then be considered part of, adjacent to the 1-story portion, or would it still be considered adjacent to the 9-story portion?
So we, when writing the design guidelines, I know Mrs. Jones was on the board, we're very concerned about these being very rigid for existing properties and making it very difficult for them to redevelop. So we added the language about infill so that the Planning Commission could really determine that, rather than staff doing a formula and saying like 16 feet is max. The Planning Commission could look at the context, look at the building, see if it is a different building than something else. What for me is important is, of course, hearing from you, and I use that information in the future, but also the folks in the audience today who have heard me say, increase your parapet. I want them to understand if something here is different, why. You may think that it's okay with this building, and that's because it's an infill project that meets those standards in the design guidelines. It's not a new construction that we want to be built to a certain standard, but they do have that flexibility. It's just, the written design guidelines make it fair for everybody coming in to know what the rules are, and for me, it makes my job just a little bit easier to be like, well, let me tell you why it's different, or why the hospital may have more screen wall than we'd allow somewhere else. I'm not saying that's what you should do. I'm just saying, like, the conversation, that's how it's beneficial for not just me, but other folks who are watching, and in the future we'll ask maybe why did this project get this and nobody else did.
Sure, thank you.
Sure.
This is more of an internal question, inside the building question. Is this building going to transition to the existing hospital?
Yes, sir. The driver for this project is the 2nd floor of our new addition, which is the current ICU of the hospital. So the driver for this project is to expand the ICU care here in this hospital. It is going over the ambulance area, which is why we're kind of establishing that ambulance drop-off underneath the building. But the driver for it is that 2nd floor. So shifting the building shifts the availability for nurses and all that to stay within the unit of the ICU.
Will that be I'm looking back at the old hospital where every time there was an addition, there was a funky transition to the next part of the hospital. Is that going to be a seamless transition, or is it going to be kind of one of these type of things like the old hospital was?
We're praying that it's not. It is straightforward as it is now, very seamless. Luckily, this hospital obviously is not that old. Sure. It's only 10 years, so it benefits us to be able to add on to a hospital that's still relatively in its infancy.
Sure.
I'm done. Anybody?
I'll just make the comment, I think that, and Mr. Wright already mentioned this, but the fact of the matter is history tells us in the 10 years it's been there that they're going to be adding on to this building within a 5 to 10 year period. I'm not sure why you're not doing it now, but that's none of my business. But I think for common sense sake, we can live with this screening wall for the time frame that's going to be there.
I agree.
I don't usually like assumptions, but I can live with that assumption. Mr. Halliburton.
Thank you.
And I think certainly, Gordon Ferguson has, in his whole vision for this whole campus, has been very conscious of the look and the feel, and I don't think he would be happy with that if that was something that was, especially, it looks like patient rooms maybe looking down over that. I mean, I think hopefully it's the best it can be under the circumstances, and really it's more looking forward to what it's going to be in the future. And I think everything they've done out there has been just I think a major asset to our community. It all looks great. I was concerned first looking at this that, are people going to be pulling up in here thinking that it's the emergency room as opposed to over just on around the corner? And I'm sure, y'all are working out signage, and that's a whole different ballgame for that. But as far as just the look and what we're approving today, I'm happy with what they've presented and the reasoning behind it.
And it's a necessary addition, so I'm glad it's being done. If there are no other comments, I'll make a motion to approve, subject to all staff comments.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor state aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you all very much.
Thank you all.
All right, next we are moving on to a few items in Clary Park. So the first one is Clary Park Lot 14, the Town Place Hotel. It's an initial design review of a 67,255 square foot hotel located on 2.3 acres. Zone CH and GDO 1 located along Corlew Lane. Robbie Corlew Lane, thank you. Chartwell Hospitality Developer. Ms. Green.
Thank you very much. Our next item is another item of initial design review, and it's a lot that will be within the Clary Park Clary Park Master Planned area. The Clary Park Master Plan consists of property zone PUD and property zone CH. Of course, they're all located within the Gateway Design Overlay District. This parcel itself will be Lot 14, which is identified as Area 4 in the zoning book. And it is Zone CH Commercial Highway District. The proposed use is for a 120-room hotel called Town Place Hotel, and there's an E on town, which is probably not that important. But
It makes it fancy, I think.
it makes it fancy, according to Mr. Blomley, who knows all things fancy. The subject property, of course, Lot 14, the structure itself is oriented to the new road that will be constructed, which I've been calling Robbie Corlew Lane. I hope it's Robbie, because I know it's in honor of somebody who's no longer with us.
It is.
It is? Okay, good. The road doesn't exist yet, of course, but we have plans approved for its construction, and the developer is currently constructing the public right-of-way. This lot only has frontage on one road, which the next two will be multi-front parcels. The formal open space for this hotel will include a pool, pergola, outdoor seating, planters, pedestrian scale lighting, fire pit. It also, and I think it's something that I think they've done really well designing their formal open space, and there's going to be some images that convey that to you, and I think when people have questions about it, this would be a good example for them to see. The site was also designed with our minimum separations that are required in the Gateway Design Overlay District. The Robbie Corlew will have some streetscape elements. On one side, that's consistent with the Gateway Streetscape Master Plan, and on the north side is a little bit different. You may recall the streetscape, and this is what will be in front of the hotel, included a linear park, a 30-foot linear park with a bus pullout. There are benches and trees and pedestrian scale lighting in addition to any street lighting that may be required. And those are all being installed by the developer. And the applicant, of course, knows this, and I think we've said it more times than anybody'd like to care to hear us, but the elements that are required that are along the frontage of this property will be required to be installed with this site, regardless of who builds it. So if their contract is negotiated, Hines builds this and they build that, the city planning department is fine with that, but just that it's there is what we'll make sure, what we should be making sure happens prior to any certificate of occupancies. The development, of course, is rather large, and there's a lot of moving parts happening at one time.
So, I know, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I'm interrupting you. So, the street improvements that you're speaking of, would it only be with respects to this parcel, or are we requiring them to do this throughout the roadway, or is the roadway only going to go to this parcel until they're ready to develop the next parcel?
Throughout the roadway. They're
Okay.
doing most of the road now, not all of the road. And with the construction of that road should also be the installation of those elements. On the north side, on the south side, the individual lots will be putting some of those things in.
Okay, thank
But
you.
it is with the master plan, preliminary plat, and landscape plan that was approved by Planning Commission earlier this year. As I mentioned, it is a 120-room hotel, and so the plans have demonstrated that it meets our minimum parking standards. It fronts Robbie Corlew, and upon our urging, has shared access with the two lots on either side so that we can reduce the number of driveways onto that street. It is a local street, but we anticipate that it will be used. There'll be quite a few rooftops or housing or dwelling units within the area who will be riding their bicycle, who will be driving, and who will be walking or exercising in this area. And so we wanted to make sure that the site accommodates all forms of transportation, and they were able to do that. The site does not have banquet space or meeting area outside of your typical, just maybe a place to print some items if you're staying there, or a continental breakfast, so they don't need to provide parking for restaurants, and that's not part of the plan. And, as I mentioned, Robbie Corlew functions as the main street of Cleary Park development by connecting different land use areas, including this green space is a 10-foot wide multi-use path, on-street parking, which is not in front of this lot but further down, transit stops, ornamental pedestrian scale street lights, pocket parks with benches and site furnishings, canopy trees, ornamental trees, and their specific layout and design was done by Reagan Smith, another design firm. This project is done by Catalyst. I think with Cleary Park, this isn't an offside. Every engineering company in the state of Tennessee has a different lot in this development, so it's been an opportunity for us to make sure that they're all sharing plans with each other and making sure everything's coordinating. Mr. Taylor's laughing because he's one of those other ones as well. But
Everybody's working in the sandbox.
yeah, it's being distributed through all the companies that we see. The site is required to extend reuse water to the back of the curb to irrigate the areas within the right-of-way, in addition to what's on the site. And the pedestrian scale lighting will be spaced 100 feet, which is closer than outside the gateway, but that's because of the planned development. So with this being a hotel, there are items that in the past I know have been subject of conversation. One is the louver window areas below the windows where you might have a PTAC system, which is how they heat and cool the room. And so I did ask them to look at that early on like we do with all of our hotels, and actually my image is a few pages back. I'm sorry for kind of jumping around. And so this photo shows the air conditioning grills are proposed to match the color and finish of the window frame, with other mechanical louvers to match the color of the adjacent wall surface. And so I just wanted you to have an opportunity to see how they were managing that on the site. And then I'll go to the images of the structure itself now. Maybe it looks prettier at night. There you go. So, of course, an initial design review, the primary focus is for you to consider the architecture of the building, provide any feedback that you might have at this point so they can integrate that into the plans. And when they come back for final design review, be prepared to show you how they've made those modifications. They have included a base of building along the structure on all 4 sides. The back of the structure actually faces the north, which is visible from future townhomes and future apartments, and then Robert Rose Drive. And so all 4 sides have similar treatments made to them, and so there's no true back of house addressing that gateway standard. This building itself is 5 stories, approximately 60 feet or 61 feet tall. And one of the design guideline standards, not GDO, is that buildings incorporate common design elements from adjoining developments where a theme or concept exists. You can see that the roof is flat with some slanted parapets that have added additional height to the roof line so they can add the interest to that roof as well. And then I'll take you through some images. The building is, from the first time we talked to today, it really is a predominantly brick building, brick and stone building. You can see there is EIFS, but it's really up at that 5th story in most instances. The black and white rendering, if you just looked at it, some of the areas look like they might be EIFS, but they're actually brick. On the ends of the building, there's some brick, and there is some EIFS on the inside. I asked them to prepare some perspective renderings, so there's elevations, color elevations, and perspective renderings, because I know it's a little bit easier to see a building in scale with those renderings, so I'll show you some of those. This is in the entrance of the building. You can see the canopy is a little bit different. It's got that slant up in the metal columns, and so I told them I would show that to you and let you review it and see if you thought that it was appropriate. The lights that are on the slant up part do have casings that come down so that they don't shine out into the parking lot. The pool is part of the formal open space, and you can see that here. And then the formal open space plans are here as well. And so the building, all 4 sides. There you go. I have the material board. I'm going to pass it around and ask the applicants to come up to provide some additional information on the project. The board needs to be handled a little carefully because some of the materials might come off. Or I can hold it up if you prefer.
Yeah, I think that's good.
If you guys need the board, it's right here.
Good afternoon. My name is Arthur Killebrew. I'm the architect on the project with Downs & Gillespie Killebrew Architects out of Memphis. And we've worked with this team on several properties in the Nashville area and are very happy to introduce this one to you today. So this is a Marriott Town Place Suites hotel, but it's, as you can see from the renderings, it's got quite a bit of upgrade exterior material to meet your standards. And I don't know what to add to what Margaret Ann's already said, except to offer answers to any questions you may have.
So is, I'm not familiar with this flagship. I mean, I am Marriott, but not Town Place Suites. Is this a long-term hotel or a short-term hotel?
It's a short-term hotel, but it's a larger suite than a standard, than their other standard.
Okay.
It's a good-looking hotel.
I think it looks really good. I like it. You did a good
Thank you.
job.
It's been a team effort, and we've really appreciated all the input. Margaret Ann did bring up a question about the canopy. This canopy design is part of their flagship element at Marriott, but we've made sure that it is all pre-finished aluminum to match the metal of the framing around storefronts and windows, which is all a champagne Kynar finish.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't put it on my house, but it doesn't offend me.
any questions of,
And so this is initial design review. If anybody has any specific questions or problems with anything or would like to see anything different before it comes back for final design review. That's what we need to know.
Yeah,
I like
I think it looks good.
I'm fine with it. I'll make a motion that we approve, subject to all staff comments.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
thank you.
Thank you all very much. All right, next we have Cleary Park Lots 5 and 6, the shops at Cleary. Initial design review of 11,200 square foot multi-tenant retail business located on 2 acres, zoned CH and GDO 1, located along Medical Center Parkway and Robbie Corlew Lane. GBT Realty Corporation is the developer. Ms. Green.
Thank you. This next item is for initial design review for 2 lots, lots 5 and 6 in the Cleary Park Master Plan Development. The plan is to combine those 2 lots together to remove the property line that bisects them so they can be developed as one parcel. The applicants are calling this multi-tenant retail building the Shops at Cleary, and it's an approximately 11,200 square foot multi-tenant retail building on 2 acres. The property is zoned CH and GDO 1, and it actually has frontage on Medical Center Parkway and Robbie Corlew Lane. So it's a double frontage lot, so on 2 sides is a front, as opposed to a corner lot where you would see it on 2 adjacent properties. With it having frontage on 2 lots, that presented an opportunity, a design challenge for the applicants to be able to design a structure that addressed both streets. The zoning ordinance does require that the primary entrance be oriented toward the street with a higher functioning classification. That's Medical Center Parkway because, of course, it carries a lot more traffic than Robbie Corlew Lane will. And so the entrances of the buildings are oriented toward that Medical Center Parkway. But then they've added some treatments to the building. I think the site plan from afar looks like a frog from Frogger. And so you can see the little frog legs are actually shared access drives. I see lots of things in plans that I review. I review a lot of plans. And so you can see they're sharing access drives to both Robbie Corlew and Medical Center Parkway so they can reduce the number of driveways that go onto the public right-of-way, which helps with the operations of the street. You know, the number of vehicles doesn't change, but it does help with the operation and management of Medical Center Parkway and Robbie Corlew Lane. Because they're straddling those entrances on the property lines, there's a 15-foot separation between parking access and adjacent properties. They're providing that on the interior side of the development. Generally, multi-tenant retail buildings are referred to as commercial centers. So we have a definition of commercial center, and with that definition, restaurants uses can occupy no more than 35% of the gross floor area of all buildings. This building does not qualify as a commercial center because it exceeds 35% restaurant space. The 2 end units are restaurants, and then the interior units they've parked as one as general retail, which is 1 to 300, and the other as a furniture store. Furniture stores have a much lower parking demand in our zoning ordinance than retail. So a furniture store is 1 space for every 600 square feet of floor area, whereas general retail is 1 to 300. And so we shared with them that because this isn't a commercial center, each use will need to have enough parking to support the use. And if the site itself doesn't have enough parking, then space may not be available to be leased in the future. Say the furniture store left and they wanted to put something else in there. Certainly a restaurant couldn't go in there because the site doesn't accommodate more restaurant space. We have, usually some of our older developments, we have some where you might see vacant tenant spaces, but that's because they've given their parking reserved to other uses. And so just letting them know that we'll continue to manage parking as tenant build-outs come into us because, of course, they'll build a shell and then the individual tenants will come to us. Some of the design elements they wanted to provide to us at tenant build-out, and we can manage that so long as there is a general palette. So, you know, there has to be a cohesive theme, not a bunch of different colors of awnings, and they all need to kind of go together. And so what you're seeing now is a mixture of fabric and metal awnings. This site does have access to Robbie Corlew Lane, which is not constructed, but being constructed by the developer, and some of the infrastructure, or the streetscape elements, all the infrastructure, some of the streetscape elements are being put in by the developer. This lot, much like the last one, will be responsible for everything contiguous with its property, so everything that is along its property line has to be installed and accepted by the city, regardless of who installs it. If all things go according to plan, all these projects in Clary Park will have those elements in well before the tenants come to us and wanting a certificate of occupancy. The streetscape master plan adjacent to this property is more in line with our traditional, what's in the master plan that we have approved, so it has the irrigation, the street trees, the decorative pedestrian scale lighting. And so as initial design review, we would want you to look at the architecture of the building, provide any feedback that you may have regarding the building. We've been working with the site for quite a while, particularly with the challenge that they wanted to have a drive-through on one end of the building. And maybe if I zoom in, it'll be a little better. So here's the site, zoomed in a bit. And this end tenant would like to have a drive-through. They'd like to manage it differently than like a traditional fast food restaurant where there's a speaker box and then you come around to get your food. They'd like to do it something more like what's on Memorial Boulevard with the Panera and the Chipotle, where you can order online and it's a pickup window, but you can't order at the speaker box. I think Panera had a speaker box, they took it away, they added it back, but I guess Chipotle is the better example. In our zoning ordinance, we make no difference between that management type because it can change at any time. So we don't want them to come in, design a site that doesn't meet our standards, and then in the future need a speaker box. So we did require the minimum number of queuing spaces for restaurants identified in our zoning ordinance, the bypass lane. And some of the challenges that we had were that this is actually a front, and of course the other side's a front, and so pulling those elements out of that front and then having a bypass lane that doesn't put you in direct conflict with oncoming traffic. So they've installed, or they're proposing, a raised landscape island for the drive-through lane, so it's not just all asphalt or concrete. And then when you get around the corner, there is that, we call it bypass lane, some people call it an escape lane, and that you can get out of line for that project itself. They do have one-way traffic on the sides of the building with two-way traffic in the fronts and backs. Generally, we don't spend a lot of time talking about the site plan initial design review, but I think it's important that you understand the operation when you look at the design of the building for this one. And I'm going to ask the architect to go through the design of the building. There is a mixture of real glass and spandrel glass in the buildings, and that spandrel glass we have asked to be backlit so that it does have that same ambiance like you might see at the Avenue. They've added a lot more brick than they had before, so the building is primarily a brick and glass building, which would be in line with what our expectations are. They are continuing to work on the site in the formal open space. I don't think they were quite there yet, but they're getting close. One of the elements that I wanted them to work on was breaking up the facades of the building, and so this is essentially rectangles within a rectangle, and so the GDO standards ask for undulation or changes in the wall plane to create the interest, and so you just don't have flat lines going around the building. As a matter of practice, not a matter of something in the zoning ordinance, if a difference in brick is less than 12 inches, we haven't really accepted that as a change in dimension. We say to create a shadow line, it needs to be at least 12 inches to really be seen. 4 inches is really nominal, and you're not going to notice that. And so what they're relying on, I think, are these breaks here, and the architect will come explain those to you. I think that 12-inch has been a matter of practice that we've been for years using, but it's not something in the zoning ordinance. And then, before I introduce the design team, did you have any questions from me about the site or the layout?
I have a question. So is it, I can't keep up from time to time. Is there any opportunity for more landscaping up near the building, or is it just...
This rendering isn't completely accurate as far as the site layout. There is a requirement that you have at least 5 feet of landscaping. Now, that's exclusive of entrances. 5 feet on either side of an entrance, you don't have that base of building landscaping. But let me see if the site plan shows it any better. We get y'all sick from moving on to all the pages. Here we are. So with this plan, this speckled is concrete. The white rectangles are landscape areas. So there will be landscaping on this side of the building, which is Med Center.
Yeah.
And then this is the side facing Robbie Corlew. The speckled is concrete. And the kind of the plain white rectangles will be landscape areas.
Okay.
So that, the rendering, I think they provided it because I'd asked them to, but it doesn't really show that landscaping that you're going to see there, like you here. An area that is exempt from that is this pickup window area. So this side that has a pickup window is exempt from that 5-foot base of building landscape requirement.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions?
Did we cover how many tenants are expected here? Assumingly more than, 5, are they going to break it up into smaller ones?
Sure.
I saw lots of doors.
And we can ask them. I had on the parking calculations counted that they identified 4, but let's see. Here's the parking calculations. I can't see the small stuff. So I've got retail, furniture, and restaurant. Maybe they just grouped all the spaces. I think maybe this is a good question for the architect.
Okay.
Hello.
Hello, welcome.
Doug Cantrell with MJM Architects. Unfortunately, our project manager's last day was last Friday, so we're still playing catch-up here. So right now, we're looking at 5 tenants with the 2 unknown. Let's see if I can figure out how to drive this thing. As Margaret Ann had mentioned, 2 proposed restaurant tenants, and then the center section is kind of an unknown right now, so it could be 1 or it could be 2, and then a furniture store on the end. As Margaret Ann was mentioning, we've kind of gone through several iterations of the building with brick, EIFS, 4-sided architecture, tenant layout, tenant mixes. It's kind of it's evolved quite well. The end caps are meant to be, let's see if I can get back to the rendering. Your primary focus, you've got the brick in the fields above of the signs and transom windows on the end caps. You've got the black brick at the knee walls that kind of blend well with the storefronts. Every tenant bay, you get a 12-foot or 12-inch separation with a break in the parapet. Again, it's still all brick. You've got the symmetry on either end with the bricks wrapping the corners. The back will be kind of the same language with storefront doors with spandrel that are backlit, but will essentially repeat what's on the front side. Just kind of see what's going on in the back. And the brick doesn't wrap the corners as it does on the front. Then you've got your landlord room with the shared sprinkler riser and landlord panel.
Okay. Jill, got a question, Ms. Overwire?
I don't know that it's a question so much as this rendering makes it look like the cluster mailbox is kind of in the middle of the parking lot and maybe a little obtrusive to cars and pedestrians. Does it look a little more fluid in real life?
Seems like an odd place, but maybe that's...
It's for the Frogger, it's an obstacle.
Shut up.
I'm not seeing the cluster of mailboxes.
It's in between the pedestrian crosswalks right here. Right there.
Okay.
To the right, that's it.
I have to get with civil on that one. Is there a more preferred location, centrally located, that's out of the way?
I don't know if the USPS has a preference that it be on kind of because this is the medical center portion of the building, so that's kind of the main focal point, and then couple that with it's just kind of sitting in the middle of the parking lot, or at least that's how it looks, but a rendering may look totally different.
Right, that's, yeah, that the ADA access to the public right-of-way.
It may be better on the back of the building.
Yeah.
Back here. Yeah. We'll take note of it back to the civil and see if there's a reason he put it there.
There's no back.
Oh, there's no back.
There is no back, that's right.
The opposite.
Well, it is another front, but it's Robbie Corlew versus Medical Center Parkway.
Right.
So
And just maybe not so much in the center of the
maybe
pedestrians and
one
cars.
of the ends or something.
Yeah. And again, I don't know USPS's, if they have any requirements on that, but.
And I can't think about any of those other strip malls down through there where their mail is located.
All of them are in the back. Yep.
I'm glad you looked at that.
Okay, all right. Something to work on. Okay, anything else for design review purposes?
Clarify. Margaret Ann, we were talking about the 12-inch bricks versus the 4-inch bricks. Were you talking about the vertical pillars or the horizontal kind of lining? It's easier if you point, yeah.
These.
Okay.
So the set out is 12 inches instead of 4 inches.
Yeah, yes.
You prefer 12, but this is 4?
This is 12 inches. I mentioned that 12 inches is our minimum, and they just use 12 inches all over the building. And so I just wanted to make sure that that was acceptable.
Gotcha.
You know, some places, they stagger the suites. This building is kind of struck, hard because of the two fronts. And so they may project one tenant in front of the other by like 4 feet, or you create these offsets. Really what you want is not avoid long linear planes. And so in the past, we've said 12 inches is the minimum, and so they said, okay, well, we'll do 12 inches there. 4 inches is usually where people start.
Gotcha.
And then outside the gateway, maybe they might do 12 inches, or 4 inches. But these are 12. It's just, do you feel like that break is happening that you like to see?
I mean, it's definitely a linear project, but it's also not a massive project. It's only 11,000 square feet, so.
They tried to help with the break by like doing this in the parapet a little bit to, I think, emphasize that. And the one thing that is very helpful that you don't notice right away is the scuppers and downspouts are integrated into the building, so they're not going to be putting downspouts on the.
Cool. And I assume signage will go on the brick, right? Not the canopies?
I'm sorry?
Signage will go on the brick?
Yes, the signage will go above the window, not on those canopies.
Okay.
And that's why they've got, maybe the brick is different on the ends as well. Initially, they had this ephes, which of course that was too much ephes on this building in the gateway. And so they replaced the ephes with bricks, and they did the lighter color brick to help with what they're doing. In the gateway, we like for the brick to have its own inherent color and not be painted. You can paint ephes and other elements, but not paint the brick. And so when you have ephes up there, not only is it an opportunity for maintenance, but it's an opportunity to sneak your sign limits a little bit wider because it's not really a sign, but then you color it. So with the brick, it's a simpler process, and we can manage it a little easier.
Okay.
And I didn't give you boards. They've got a very nice board. I'm sorry. Everything, my definition of nice is it stays on when I shake it.
Shade. So you guys think you're open to relocating that mailbox?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's a very nice looking building, but I do think it just looks like a lot of other buildings. And I was thinking right there on Medical Center Parkway in that prime spot that maybe we might get a little more excitement, but you've certainly met the requirements.
It is a struggle for a building this size to make it interesting without making it busy.
Yeah.
And, these look blank without the signage. And
Yeah, I
the
know
signage
that'll
kind of gives a little
help.
more interest.
And the landscaping.
The landscaping, the lighting, I wish we had a really cool rendering at night.
Yeah,
Those do
I'm
look-
sure it will look fantastic when it's finished, right?
Yes.
Absolutely.
And GBT's done several of these little small shops with the white and the black brick, and they look clean and crisp and up to date. That seems so. And they have their own kind of elegance to it, I guess.
Okay.
All right, any other comments or questions?
If there are none, I'll move for approval, subject to all staff comments.
Second?
Motion and a second. All in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
I think everybody voted on that. All aye and no no's. So there we go. All right, thank you all very much. Appreciate it. Our next item, another Clary Park. We have Clary Park Lot 8, Firebirds. Initial design review of a 6,041 square foot restaurant on 1.8 acres, zoned CH and GDO 1, located along Medical Center Parkway, Honey Locust Trail, and Robbie Corlew Lane. Firebirds Wood-Fired Grill is the developer. Ms. Green.
Thank you, ma'am, and Planning Commission members. Our final item under the initial design review segment of our Gateway Design Overlay portion of the agenda is for you to consider.
Not quite final.
Of the initial design review, next one's plat, right?
Oh, the next one is a plat. Okay, I thought
Yeah,
you
it was a
were
very
saying
convoluted
done.
way
You're
of
not
saying that,
quite
I'm
done.
sorry. It was too wordy, I don't even get paid by the word, you'd think I would. So this next item is for another initial design review, and it's for a new restaurant. The restaurant itself is 6,041 square feet, and it's a sit-down restaurant. It will have the option of having to-go or to-go food, so you order and you come in some designated parking spaces and pick up your food. This site actually has 3 fronts, and so the project in Clay Park, we've been working around the various fronts on the properties. It fronts along Medical Center Parkway, which is a major arterial, Honey Locust Trail, a local street, and Robbie Corlew Lane, a local street. This is Lot 8 in that development of Clary Park, and it's part of the master plan. It's located within Area 3, whereas the hotel was Area 4 in that master plan. As I mentioned, it has frontage along 3 streets, and it's designed with 2 shared access drives, and I'll show those to you. I got the... so that we can reduce the number of driveways going onto our streets and help with the operation of the properties. The plans do orient the front of the structure towards Medical Center Parkway, which of course has the higher functioning classification. The outdoor dining area is fronting along Honey Locust Trail, which would be a street that goes directly into the avenue. And then the other front is Robbie Corlew Lane. However, that's really the service area of this building, and you can see that in just a moment. The on-site parking is designed to accommodate 34 seats within the outdoor dining area, and the parking reflects that. 4 to-go parking spaces for takeaway orders, and 171 seats within the restaurant. They may have fewer than that, but the site could accommodate that many. The restaurant will have a bar section as well, so that count includes stools in the bar. The site was able to be designed to meet the minimum separations between building and parking and access and adjacent property lines, which is something unique to our gateway. This site also is obligated to meet the Gateway Streetscape Master Plan with the installation of sidewalks, decorative pedestrian-style plazas, and so that's because this is a signalized intersection, so you'll see a decorative plaza there. A decorative crosswalk, which our city engineer is working through new designs for decorative crosswalks. We've talked about that before. And then along all the fronts would have street trees, irrigation, sidewalks. Some of the elements are being installed by Hines, some of the elements by this builder. In any case, we'll require them to be completed and installed prior to the issuance of a permit. This is the initial design review of this project, so the focus is on the architecture of the building, and I'll start with their rendering since I think it shows the structure in the best light. Firebirds is a sit-down restaurant. There is a restaurant in a multi-tenant space, a Firebirds in Nashville. It's on the Nashville side of Brentwood, not the Brentwood side of Brentwood. And so you may have seen it or eaten there. They do have one there, but this is actually going to be a standalone and fit their brand. And so they've been working with our staff to meet their brand requirements and our community standards here in Murfreesboro. The proposed building is single-story, about 24 feet tall. We have talked about opportunities to integrate common design elements from adjoining developments within this Clary Park master plan. The design has two colors of brick, black diamond velour and Boyston matte. There is hardy cedar mill siding just below the roof, and that is this material here that's kind of a greenish taupe. And then hardy is permitted, but only as a secondary material. The primary material needs to be brick, stone, or rock, not cementitious brick, stone, or rock. And so hardy.
Material board?
Go ahead.
Is there a board?
Yes.
Thank you.
They're also proposing a new material on that board, so when you take a look at it, if you don't mind looking at the thermery cladding, maybe closely, and then a copper core tile as well. The thermery cladding, and I'm going to get this wrong, the architect's going to correct all the things that I've said wrong, but it's essentially a wood that's been dehydrated or petrified so that there's no moisture left into it. And according to the information they shared with me, that process of drying it in a kiln, I believe, helps it last longer. And so wood, of course, would be a tertiary or accent material that the Planning Commission consider, but it's not the palette of primary and secondary material. We do require those to be brick. And so that material is on the board, and we'd like you to consider that. And of course, they'd like you to consider that for incorporation on the building. They're using black metal canopies over the windows, and the storefront is proposed to be dark bronze, and of course it's coated. The service area I mentioned is along the rear, and so they were trying to figure out a way to design the service area so that it's screened. So if this elevation will show the height of this wall is the screen wall for the service area. This is what is beyond is the actual restaurant. So this is the screen wall. And so in order to break up the elevation of that screen wall, they've put in panels of this thermery material that's also used on the building. Apparently I lost my place. And that's the view from Medical Center Parkway. There's a little additional landscape area there where they have some of the utilities and are proposing to do some additional landscaping. The outdoor dining area, initially I'd asked them to look at running brick up all the columns, but when they did that, the brand was really concerned about the aesthetic. It changed the overall aesthetic for the design. So if you look here, this is these are actual canopies, and you can see the brick goes up a certain amount, but they've clad that upper portion with a thermery, so it's not like an exposed just steel beam. They're wrapping it in that wood, and so we would like to know if that's something that you think that is appropriate. It was important to the brand, important enough that they wanted it to be discussed today, and would like for you to consider this as an alternative to having brick going all the way up them. The wall beyond has brick in it, and they felt like the 5 columns with brick all the way up was really a heavy result. So that's an overall of the site. Do you have any questions for me before I have the applicants come up and discuss? Oh, and I'm going to ask them to talk about their fire tornado. Every time I talk to them, I want to talk about this fire tornado. And I've also said the wrong word for that, but it's a swirling fire in a tube. Apparently, fairly easy to entertain, but that's a part of the, lighting is in our design guidelines and in our Gateway Design Overlay District, and adding that nighttime interest, highlighting architectural features, and really adding emphasis to the entrances is really important. And so that's an alternative. They're using traditional lighting, but also incorporating the fire NATO or whatever it's called to make it interesting.
So what we have on our screen right now is what's facing Medical Center Parkway, correct?
This is Medical Center Parkway.
Yeah.
This is
Okay.
Honey Locust.
All right.
Robbie Corlew's in the back.
Okay.
What's the material behind the Firebirds?
What's the material on the,
Behind Firebirds?
The sign.
Which one?
oh, up here, it's a tile. And so there should be a tile on that board.
So that's tile, but the other one is that.
So the thumbery is just wrapping the columns.
It's also on the screen wall. I'll have them come up and identify all the areas that it is.
Good afternoon. I'm Steve Starr with Starr Design, the architect on the project and one of the lead designers for Firebirds. The material behind the Firebirds on the front entry is that through-body porcelain tile that's meant to essentially mimic Corten steel. The design and the inspiration for all of the materials is materials having to do with fire. So we've got that Corten steel, we've got the wood thermery, the black charred brick. So the sign, to answer your question specifically, the sign in here is the sorry, yeah. That's the through-body porcelain tile. The signs on the other facades are mounted on the cementitious plank siding.
So this wood material that y'all are wanting to use is on the posts, correct?
It's on the posts and the beams, and most importantly, it's on the underside of the soffits around the canopies and around the parapet. They extend approximately 2 feet, and there's a concealed LED light in the fascia that shines back and washes the wood, and that is a signature branded element to Firebirds.
And y'all have used this wood for what length of time?
I believe 4 years is the oldest.
Is it stained? The exterior, is it stained or?
No, it's natural, the color you see on the board, and it comes with a factory oiled finish. And then when they need to cut it, they oil the end, the cut ends. Oh, thank you. Yeah, the product, I believe, is warranted for, I believe it's 10 years, but please don't quote me on that. We've looked at several products, from using wood veneered aluminum to resin impregnated wood, and this has the most natural look, as well as being maintenance-free and significant resistance to rot and weather damage.
So I like the look. The only question we have when we're looking at it is from a maintenance standpoint and trying to be able to manage that look, and it stays looking like that over a 20-year period or whatever. So after 10 years, what do you guys do?
We haven't had an issue in court with that
With that at all.
at all. We have seen no...
No degradation.
It's actually held up better than the faux wood aluminum panels that we originally used.
I have fought him a lot to get to use other materials on these buildings, and he resists every time simply because, from a cost standpoint, because this material does not decay or deteriorate. It'll look like that.
Sir, if you could go to the mic so that we could pick it up.
Yes, sir. Again, Steve, I'm Darren Knight. I'm the Director of Construction for Firebirds Wood Fired Grill. I have leaned on Steve to change this from a cost standpoint, obviously, and he has resisted that simply because this material holds up long-term. We've had it on buildings now for 4 or 5 years, and we have noticed no deterioration of this wood whatsoever. It looks just like it did the day we installed it 5 years later.
It does silver slightly over time due to the exposure to UV, but that actually, I think, is actually a benefit to the fact that it's a natural product.
I guess it would also benefit some, the fact that most of what you're using it is under an overhang to a degree.
Yes. And like I said, this is a signature element to Firebird, so it is in their best interest to keep it looking crisp and clean at all times because we're illuminating it.
By silvering, do you mean like a silver tint or a shadow? What do you mean by silvering?
Are you familiar with the wood like Ipe?
No.
Okay, patinas, but instead of turning green from UV and oxidation, it has a slightly silver tint to it.
Okay.
I don't know that I love the Firebird sign on the Hardy located on the Honey Locust elevation side. It may look a lot better in person. I will say the color on this Hardy does look different than the material board, in my opinion, but I don't know that I love the sign on the Hardy. Do the other stores have that too, the other locations?
We actually have, the other locations have it sitting on the face of the canopy. And we were asked to move it and put it on the wall. It is absolutely our preference to put it out sitting on the face of the canopy.
Well, I think I prefer it on the wall too. I just am wondering if maybe a different material. I worry that the Hardy behind the sign cheapens it a little bit from Honey Locust, but I might be the only one. Anybody else?
I personally think it's a good-looking building. I like the wood wrap. And with the patina, the silvering, the wood may actually look even better silvered than it does with the natural color that we saw on the board.
I agree with Sean, and one thing nobody said anything about, but I think we were asked about it, was the fire tornado element, and I think that's a really neat element personally.
Sure. Yeah, it's a steel column base with pentagon-shaped insulated glass enclosure, and what's called a halo torch flame that creates a cyclone effect as the flame goes up the glass portion, and then it's capped with a black steel chimney pipe.
Yep, neat element.
It's cool. It's cool.
I think it does a great job setting off the rest of the building as well, between the different colors of the black and the wood color. I think it's great.
Thank you.
Well, I love Firebirds, so if there are no other comments, I'll make a motion to approve, subject to all staff comments.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, please state aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, Ms. Green? Oh, no, Mr. Barbie. Next, we have the Murfreesboro Gateway Mark Pirtle, second re-subdivision of Lot 3, final plat for 2 lots on 10 acres, zoned MU and GDO 3, located along Gateway Boulevard. Gateway Land Investments, LLC, is the developer. Good afternoon, Mr. Barbie.
Good afternoon, Chair Jones and member of the Murfreesboro Planning Commission. The application before you here is a request for final plat approval to subdivide Lot 3, which is currently a 10-acre parcel, into 2 smaller lots. The subject parcel is located inside of our Gateway Design Overlay District, so it is required to come before this body. If it was located elsewhere, this item would be on our consent agenda. Staff has reviewed the plat, and we find it generally in good order. We do request that any approval be subject to all staff comments. I'm available if you have any questions.
Okay.
Brad, does that include the new FEMA map update?
Ms.
Is there
Knoll,
someone here to
you know
talk
if
on that?
Good afternoon, members of Planning Commission. The update is not effective yet, so currently it is using the effective maps. There is a staff comment that says if the plat is to be recorded after the maps come effective, they should update the map. So Matt can maybe answer when they're planning on recording the map or plat. Okay, so it should be good as it is.
Okay.
Any other questions?
If there are none, I move for approval, subject to all staff comments.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Next, we are moving on to plats and plans. Our first item is Kingdom Ridge Commercial Master Plan for 8 lots on 17.6 acres, Zone CH, located along Franklin Road and Covenant Boulevard. Swanson Development LP is the developer. Ms. Rush, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Yes, this is a master plan for the Kingdom Ridge commercial developments located along Franklin Road, Covenant Boulevard, and Malachite Drive. 2 lots of the subdivision are platted and recorded. One was for Tommy's Car Wash, and the other one was for Christian Brothers Automotive Repair. So the roads and all the infrastructure are already there in place. They were part of the development that was the original subdivision. There's a drainage easement located along the westerly portion of the property. There's also a 20-foot wide greenway trail and parking area that you can see on this aerial that connects the preserve at Kingdom Ridge to Franklin Road and this little amenity here. The current master plan demonstrates the location and dimensions of the remaining 6 lots. I think I jumped over it. Maybe I didn't attach it.
I think
I did, didn't I?
Yep. Keep on going. There you go.
There it is. All right. And each of the lots that will be platted by the property owner as the proposals for development have been coming through. So at this point, this is kind of a housekeeping item, just to identify where the remaining 6 lots will be located and how they'll be aligned, and staff is recommending approval of this master plan, subject to all staff comments.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rush. Next, we have Lytle Creek Commons, a site plan for 63 single-family attached dwelling units or townhomes on approximately 5 acres, zoned RM16, located at the southwest corner of Middle Tennessee Boulevard and Forest Point Drive. Legacy South Advent Capital Partners developer. Ms. Smith.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. This particular project the Planning Commission last saw was back in 2020. The original project did include the same 63 units, although it did have an access point on the northerly portion of Forest Point Drive, as well as the southerly portion of Forest Point Drive. After some litigation, it was determined that they could not have the access because of a tree area in the frontage area, so they worked with staff to identify a new access point here that actually aligns with Houston Drive at Middle Tennessee, and that basically impacted both the Bellwood Church and their existing parking. Currently, you go into a drive approach with parking, angled parking on both the left and right side here. So there's actually 2 items, this item and the next item is 2 separate site plan reviews. And what we've done with this particular project, as I mentioned in the and I'll go to, we do have an updated rendering for the site. So as we worked with the project, we made sure that we had detailed sheets to make sure that they met all the RM16 requirements for setbacks. You'll notice this is setback 40 feet from Middle Tennessee because this is an arterial road which requires additional setbacks. These are 3-story buildings with garages in the back. So each of the units actually is a 3-bedroom, 2-car attached garage with 2 surface parking spaces in front of those garages. And then as you see on this drawing, where these blue areas are, this is a 5-foot landscape island, kind of midway at the apartments, and then there's just striped separations that are 3 foot, as a 3-foot area would not adequately allow landscape to survive. Once you put in a curb, you'd literally have 1 foot left of landscape area, if even that, with the concrete. So this portion shows the northerly section. The cross section that we requested here is basically 2 outbound lanes and 1 inbound lane at that particular area, and then it now aligns with Houston Drive, whereas the current location actually is offset from this particular intersection. Moving down to the center of the site, you may have seen an attachment at the end of the excerpted pages of this formal open space area. As we did look at the project, we are looking at putting underground water quality treatment and drainage, as otherwise they were not going to be able to adequately serve the 5% requirement. Although, as was written, and we asked the applicant when we're done with the presentation to go over the formal open space areas, but we have asked in the staff comments that staff finalizes this particular open space area. But currently it has a pergola, a decorative concrete patio with some furnishings out in the area, and there's an updated one at the end of the excerpted pages. And then going to the southerly portion of the site, this actually is adjacent to additional RM16, but it is single-family detached homes on individual lots of record. And so when you saw this back in 2020, you actually required a larger landscape buffer on the southerly side that is being incorporated with this, and then they do have a surface detention pond in this particular area. In looking at their site layout, we also have, as I mentioned, a 15-foot tree preservation area that they're looking at maintaining along Forest Point Drive. And then we've also asked them to provide for us a better detail of what their, so this shows the demolition of a portion of that existing parking area along this alignment, and then, again, maintaining those trees within the side area. And let me go to the updated drawings. There we go. So this, we were provided late before the publishing, but you'll see formal open space is 17,000 square feet with one pergola, decorative concrete patio with grill and table chair areas, 6 planter boxes, and then here, this is a sidewalk area with a grass recreation area in the center for that area. Staff would suggest that per the original development approval, that they would incorporate a outdoor kitchen fire pit area, which was previously approved back in 2020. And then lastly, going into the updated elevations. So we, on Middle Tennessee Boulevard, there are 2 7-plex buildings. Previously, it was a 6-plex and an 8-plex building. Staff had asked, so we have a little less massing along that street frontage to break them into the same number of units across that frontage. And then we also asked for thank you, Bill. An updated rendering color palette, so you'll notice the 3 in the centers have a different color combination than the outside ones to try to break down the building a little bit more. And then you'll notice here on the sides a wrap feature for those entryways so that it steps down the building from a 3-story to a 1-story. And then last time, Planning Commission had outstanding comments about improving these entryways, which previously was just a pitched roof over the doorway. So they've enhanced those doorways to have a larger pitch to it, and then bringing down beams to that fronter section and bringing more detail into that section. The other thing that we had the discussion back in 2020 was the Planning Commission had originally recommended that a screen wall be put in the front of the units, and the HVAC units were going to be in front. That would face Middle Tennessee with a little brick wall. As we were looking at that project, that particular room is actually a bedroom, and so for fire egress, that was going to be problematic for both building and fire departments. So we worked with the applicant, and I think previously you didn't see a very detailed drawing of what it might look like on the back side. But here, we've gone ahead and had brick integrated into that first floor, which was not previously incorporated into the plan. And then the second thing is, and you can see a little bit better detail here, is a grouping of HVAC units. So instead of, for example, this 5-plex having 5 separate platforms, the idea is to group those on the back side, and it's a raised platform HVAC unit that would serve both left and right-hand side of that platform, which we believed was a better option, and it didn't conflict with our fire and building codes. And then lastly, as you can see from this side, yes.
So you access the HVAC units via a ladder?
You do, and they may be able to go a little bit more specifically into the detail. I've not seen it, but understanding from our building codes department, it is something that is allowed, but these screens would actually come off.
Right.
So that's how you could access them. You know, normally it's like, how do you access them through a fence? So these would have to be ones that could easily detach so that they could access them at that portion. And then if you look at the side, this is a little bit of a detail of that side wrap feature, and then they also have a bump out on the sides as well for the side of the building. And I think, make sure I covered everything. And so putting things together, On the project, I think with the staff comments that we have, and you'll notice just handed out is the material boards, so they are looking at doing hardy siding as well as brick, and then a darker color roof line, and as I showed you on the updated color palette, kind of a two-tone color palette so that we can help break down some of those larger scale buildings within the complex. And I'll maybe go back to this section and ask if the applicant, last thing, parking. So parking, we do have two car garages with 2 spaces in front of those garages. The current requirement for the entirety of the space is 208 parking spaces. With the garage units, they're providing a total of 265 spaces. Of those, there's 13 of them that are located right here next to the community amenity that are separate from the units. And again, all the other ones are actually located in front of those units or within those garages. So with that, I would ask that the applicant update us on the formal open space and anything I missed.
Thank you, Holly. The older I get, the more appreciative I am of staff's memories. I'm Bill Huddleston with Huddleston Steel Engineering. We're excited to bring this project back to you. With me today is Andrew Neal and Alex Little, and also their architecture team, if you have any questions about architecture. I'm here for any civil engineering questions, but Andrew's going to address the formal open space with you right now.
Hi, how are you all today? We've been through a couple iterations of the formal open space on this project. I think when Planning Commission last saw it in 2020, there was a sand volleyball court and some furniture that was centered around the fire pit. During the next 2 years while we were in litigation, we actually considered at one point having a pool, pulled back on that, went back to look at the plans from 2020 and decided that a sand volleyball court, I don't think it was even a full regulation size sand volleyball court, really just looked like it was going to be an adult sandbox. So we went away from that and decided to bring in these 6 planter boxes, some sort of pergola building, which I think that there's a rendering or at least an elevation of that building here in these plans. If there's not, then I'll make sure that you guys get that. The same furniture, tables and chairs for people to gather around, and a grill area instead of a fire pit, which just feels a little bit more useful to us in everyday life. I think you'll get more use out of a grill area than a fire pit, but would be open if you guys prefer a fire pit to bringing that back. Originally, within the last month or so, kind of on the right side of the open space here where we've now got this courtyard with the sidewalk around is where we had the biopond. It was pointed out to us that we're using biopond area to meet the formal open space requirements, so we decided to go underground with the water treatment. That freed up this other half of the formal open space to put in the sidewalk around it. We're planning to have benches that face into the middle of the courtyard so somebody can sit and relax or watch their children play out there. And that's what we're planning to do as of right now, and would love to hear your comments or questions, and I'll answer whatever I can.
Don't know if we have a lot of specific questions on open space, because I feel like we have a lot of other things to discuss before we would even get to open space, but what comments and questions, anything specific to open space at this point? I think it's minimal, at least.
Sure, other
Walking trail, a
questions?
pergola, and planter boxes. And the walking trail is just a small trail just right there. Not really what I would call a walking trail, but I'm just in general, can't get past the air conditioning units, so I don't know if we have to start there.
No, I'm with you, Kathy. I don't understand how they moved that from the front to the back and up a story. I just...
I've never seen that. I can't imagine.
We have done it on other projects, not in Murfreesboro, but we have done it in other places.
Is it a cost issue, not just to put them on the side of the building and have them all 5 units or 7 units, 4 on one side, 3 on another, and then screen them?
There's absolutely no space on this.
Well, I'm talking about on the side of the buildings.
Some buildings.
Well, what Kathy's saying is it's 12 units per acre, so that's why there's no room to put HVAC.
I think that's got to change. And so back to Mr. Huddleston's original comment, since we originally looked at this 2 years ago, and I do remember looking at this, I remember that we had the very much of an issue at the time with the garbage cans and the AC units, and that's about what I remember about this. But I don't know, and if maybe staff can tell us at this point, what is approved at this point that, is the number of units approved and we just have to figure out a way to make it work? Or is this like a brand new site plan that we're reviewing and we get to, make comments?
So the plan that was approved in 2020, I think they would have moved forward with that plan had they not had the issue with the neighborhood that the church and them and the neighborhood were tied up in the court system for a couple of years. So they had to go back to the drawing board, relook at their access. And I think they're actually encroaching a little bit further onto the church's property than they had been with previous iterations. Is that correct, Bill?
I don't think so. Are we?
So
bottom line is what happened, we had 2 accesses on the side street, and there was litigation. The homeowner association behind us sued the church, and I guess you are involved in the lawsuit also. They were claiming land between our property and their street because they'd been maintaining trees along through there. So this went to court. It was a big, long, involved battle, and the court and everyone a party to it agreed that we'll let you have 1 access onto the side street, but you got to keep our trees. And staff said, well, you need to figure out another access somewhere. And because the church is selling us the property, we are able to create that new access directly across from Houston Drive, and it takes some of the church parking lots, so we have to, that's why you see that next item, revising that to make sure that the church has adequate parking. So all this stems from that lawsuit. We had approval.
So you had approval, and we had reached a point that we obviously agreed to and approved regarding where the AC units were going to go, where the garbage cans had to be placed, utility access, there was enough. And so now there's just less space available than there was before, and so you're having to change all that?
So like Ms. Smith mentioned, the reason why they're shifting the HVAC units to the rear was that those HVAC units were proposed to be located right outside of a bedroom. And
we approved that at that time. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, but our code dictates that there must be ingress egress out of that bedroom window, and the location of the HVAC enclosure impeded the ingress and egress out of that bedroom window in the event of a fire.
Shouldn't have been approved to begin with.
Well, you wouldn't have known.
They would have never.
We don't have no idea what it's outside of.
Yeah. But anyway, so we had a plan approved that really wasn't feasible at the time to begin with.
And so I think what Ms. Smith and the design team did was try to look for a solution that would be, that would have minimal aesthetic bearing towards the public street. Obviously those mounted HVAC units are going to be pretty highly visible from the interior of the site. But at this point, I think the positives of that are the HVACs are no longer on the side of the units facing Middle Tennessee Boulevard, no longer on the side of the units facing Forest Point Drive. So it's an imperfect solution. I think it was one that we felt was minimally invasive to the neighbors and the public street.
Well, I like Mr. Halliburton's idea. If you take one unit off of each building and put all the HVAC units in that spot for that building, you've solved the problem.
I mean, I thought the same thing in talking with building and codes. The issue is these would be for sale units. So all of that HVAC lines that you would have to have, condensation lines and everything else, would be on somebody else's private building portion, so those interior ones would have to cross 2 or 3. So it's very similar to back in the days when they would just attach cable onto a building. If it's an apartment complex, it's not a problem because there's not ownership, but my understanding from Building Codes Department is that separation, and that's why these are actually located right at the property line, so each HVAC unit and their utilities stays within that building envelope, which also has a 2-hour firewall. The only other thing that staff had thought about, although this particular architecture style would be difficult to accommodate, it would be a roof-mounted where you cut into the attic space, but then that does cause some problems with condensate lines and drippage into the building structure itself, which you usually try to avoid. Not an easy one.
I've sold some townhomes with the HVACs like these are right here in Nashville. And my dad owns an HVAC company, so I've seen him do calls on these. It's not as big of a deal as it looks like on a plan. So I'm not as tore up about that. This is a lot of units on a very small piece of property. That's already gone.
But I am happy to know that there are companies that would go out and service it. I was like, who's going to go service that?
Yeah, I mean, it's an ordeal, but it is done. It would be better if they were in the back on the ground of each level, but
and they'd have to lose at least a unit or 2 per building to make enough space to get
make it happen.
The units within the building line of each of the units.
And I think with one of the issues with this is, whereas you have in some townhome communities where the front door faces the parking area, you generally have the HVAC units on the back, on the patio. Here you have these are kind of rear entry garages on a number of the units, and so you have very little room between between each unit when you have a 2-car garage and 2 parking spaces behind each of those 2-car garages. And so space is at a premium when they're rear entry like that, and you don't have the patios like you would as if it were a front entry townhome unit.
And again, because there's a large number of units per building and the space we have to work with.
Did we talk about the striping yet? Did I miss that? Ms. Smith, can we talk about the striping? Did you say yellow?
No,
Okay.
I had said the striping had not been determined, so there is a staff comment that states that they need to provide a specific detail for that 3-foot area, but it looks like per the plan, it's shown as striping, and then as you'll notice is basically the midpoint of each of those buildings, they were able to carve out a 5-foot area, which is basically standard required to really make any landscaping fit, so that it would be very similar to our 1 island for every 12 parking spaces was staff's thought.
Sure.
And you might have a specific idea how that would work, the striping.
Will these be seen? Will it be possible to see these stripes from any of the roads that surround this development?
Not from Middle Tennessee or Forest Point, no.
Okay. That's ugly.
And this open space that's in the back corner near lots 16, 17, and 18 of Forest Point, it looks like it's fenced in. Is that,
Which unit numbers?
I'm talking about, it's in the back corner, so it's near unit number 36 and 37.
There's a detention pond.
And is it fenced in?
Yes, ma'am.
And we have that fence going along the property at Forest Point, I remember that.
Can I jump back to the striping for a second?
Sure.
We're not married to there having to be striping there. As long as, we need those parking spots to meet the minimum parking requirements. If they can be counted as parking spots without lines, then we would be fine with that. We're imagining probably concrete that could show a seam that would reasonably delineate each spot from another, and then you still have that landscape strip every 5 or 6 spaces or so. So if you guys are anti-stripes, then we can be anti-stripes too.
I appreciate that. I am personally anti-stripes. Might be the only one, though.
But what do you want to?
You could do a setting.
It's going to do with concrete.
No, not curbing, just a seam in the concrete.
I'd rather have stripes.
Oh, I was picturing
You need
concrete.
separation between each.
Okay, that's why I did.
Got to have something. Yeah, but just.
I'm saying, in order to, if the striping is an issue, then we could figure out another way to delineate between those parking spaces so you don't have people parking in the middle of 2 spaces.
Do we have an option number 3?
We can try to think of one.
I park across the 2 spaces.
Well, you're allowed to do that, as long as they're your 2 spaces, sir.
So I'm struggling to see how in the world you hit the green space requirement. Green space.
That'd be a question that Bill could probably answer better than me, but assume the calculation is in there somewhere.
Right, actually, the calculation's on the site plan layout, so they're required to have 20% open space. So open space isn't necessarily formal open space, but they are meeting that standard, believe it or not, between, there's a lot of perimeter plantings is the biggest place you'll see it. So they have 40 feet across the whole frontage of Middle Tennessee Boulevard and all those setback areas. And then they do have actually 8% formal open space, and we require 5%.
This was a push when, if that's the right word, when we looked at it the first time. And now that we've gone through a lot of different developments, it's even more of a push, in my view. I don't know how, I know we've already approved the number of units, so it's hard to go back on that, but I just know there was a lot of conversation on the front end of this one.
But I think we approved the number of units based on the fact that we thought we had all that worked out with where the AC units were going to be, and and that was just like they barely got it to where thought it was acceptable at that point.
As with the striping, you won't be able to see those HVAC units from Middle Tennessee or Forest Drive.
But actually, the striping, does it have anything to do with seeing the HVAC units?
No, that was just another question I was asked.
Okay. Help us out here, Mr. Huddleston.
I'll help you. One thing you had on the previous development, you had a stormwater pond in the middle of this thing, which not necessarily the prettiest thing you'll see. Now we've actually put that stormwater underground so we can enhance that center amenity area. And if you like, we'll work with staff and actually add even more landscaping than we've been showing. I don't think we've got benches along the walkway there right now. We can add those as well and really pretty that thing up, and I think it'll make a big difference for this entire development. The outside of it's landscaped heavily already, or as part of the plan. Having lived in a place like this, I would much rather have had my HVAC unit where we're showing it now than where it was on my patio where I sat.
True, I get that. Well, if you had, yeah.
But is this still, where it's hanging now, is that outside of a bedroom?
No, it's not. The second story,
Outside
or
of
the second floor is where the living space is, the kitchen, and et cetera. You got one bedroom on that ground floor and then two upstairs.
And can you actually access this little heating and air deck from the inside at all, or only?
No, you'd need a ladder to
from the
get in there and
outside?
service it.
And to clarify, that the units will be owner-managed, not association-managed, right?
There would be an HOA. There would be an HOA that maintains the landscaping, et cetera.
But the HVAC specifically?
Oh, yes,
Homeowner's
those will be
responsibility.
private elements that'll be managed by, yeah.
I agree with Mr. Halliburton. It's kind of hard to take, if you've already approved the number, it's kind of hard to take away from the number. The HVACs aren't a big deal with me, but I've been involved with some of these before like that. The front of the units are good-looking units. And parking lines are just, in a complex like this, you're going to have parking lines. So I don't know if there's a way to get around that or not. It's just my 2 cents.
I think it looks like an apartment building with the striping, but it could be a personal preference. I'm not sure I've seen townhomes with striping.
Indian Creek's got them, Indian Park's got them.
Those are older, though. I mean, it's 2022 now. We have higher standards.
So I feel like a part of the conversation we had back in 2020 was that this development was really something that this area needed. And so you can't take away from the number of units that we've already approved. Thank you. That we've already approved. So although I don't love to see the units go to the back, and I'm actually kind of concerned about noise pollution, all those units at the back of those units making on in the middle of the summer could be very loud, but I have to trust in the fact that these guys know what they're talking about when it comes to that, and I trust Sean. So having said that, I mean, I'm prepared to move forward on this, and yeah.
I mean, I don't know how we go back on the number of units. So only thing, and it doesn't sound like the AC units can be moved. I don't like it. I'll just say that.
I don't like it.
This whole striping thing, there's got to be another alternative. I don't know what that is. And I don't know if that can be worked out with staff.
Just let them work with staff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Seems like there's a lot of little red flags on the, or big HVAC unit-sized flags.
There's really nowhere else for the HVAC systems. We've
Yeah, but that's,
tried.
I'm putting my BZA hat on here. That's self-made.
Yeah.
And so if this was going before the board, if it had to go before the Board of Zoning Appeals, which it doesn't, that's self-made because the number of units. I could argue that all day long.
I would say this, if it wouldn't be that we had already approved that amount of numbers, there's no way we pass, I mean, I don't think this gets passed today if we hadn't already gave them that right.
Yeah, and that's where I was going with my comment that it was a push to begin with, but I don't know what we can do at this point.
I think one of the main reasons we've gone with a unit count of this high is actually to drive down the cost of the unit to the end buyer.
Yeah, I get that.
So we're trying to build more affordable housing in this location. If we built 30 or 40 units in this location, they'd have to be probably $500,000 plus houses. The goal here is to provide housing for sub $400,000.
Yeah, I get what you're saying, but I mean, we haven't had this issue with the units that I can recall with any other approved development, but I'm going
to... Let me just, before we go ahead, I just want to confirm that we, at this point, we have an approved site plan for this. When we're sitting here saying we've already approved and they could go ahead right now, I guess, with the site plan they've got, is that what we're saying? And so now we I just want to make sure that part is already approved and we're tweaking other issues within the site plan as opposed to this is a new site plan we're approving.
And Mr. Ives may need to chime in after I'm done, but I think it's kind of both. It's so there. And Mr. Ives can chime in on the vesting law in a moment, the state vesting law, but their planning commission approval is good for 3 years, and it's good for longer if they begin pulling permits and moving dirt. So their 2020 approval is still good. However, from a practical standpoint, it's not good based upon the litigation that was that proceeded in the interim, and what they're having to do to meet the terms of the resolution of that litigation. And so I believe, and Mr. Ives can correct me if I'm wrong, but once a plan is changed at the request of a developer, then those vesting rights go away and you're starting from the beginning. So it's a unique situation in that I think if they could move forward with the 2020 plan, they would, but they are kind of forced to start over in a manner of speaking. And Mr. Ives, may opine on how the state vesting law affects this and what their 2020 approvals, what rights those 2020 approvals may give them at this juncture.
I think that well, number one, you're correct that the state vesting law would give them some rights, but you're also correct that once the plan is changed, there's no more vesting. The vesting starts over. So now I'm sure you could come up with a de minimis change where you move a tree from one spot to another spot but haven't changed anything else. Most likely would not lose vesting rights. But I think these are fairly significant changes in both the layout, the site layout, what they're doing with the site. Certainly probably changes for the better, some of them at least in terms of the green space and eliminating a pond. But there's also enough changes here that I think as a practical matter, I think the Planning Commission is starting with a new plan.
Well, that may change the whole discussion.
Mm-hmm.
If the only thing, if there had not been all the litigation, and the only thing that was really the issue was we approved a plan, and then after the fact, Building and Codes tells us that, no, we can't put the AC unit here.
Correct?
Okay, which is basically, forget all the other stuff, but they tell us that. Then they would be bringing it back, I guess, to try to move that AC unit around. But I think in this case, we really have a whole lot more than just that
Yes.
going on.
Yeah, the fact that they were, how they had to manage the access onto Forest Point Boulevard, or Forest Point Drive, whatever, where that is, where the HOA from Forest Point asserted some rights to that property. We were not involved in that litigation. It was between two property owners of who owned what. And I'm not exactly familiar with the terms. I haven't seen a settlement. I don't know. I don't know what that entailed. But that also required them to change some aspects of their plan. And it's unfortunate that circumstances are such that they had to change their plan. But in fact, they had to change their plan, and I think it's changed materially. And in my opinion, that this is a new plan.
Basically, the basic layout hadn't changed. We just had to take that access off of the northeast corner, put it on the northwest corner. I'm going to try to jog your memory a little bit. The plan you did approve had the HVAC units on the front, and some of you really didn't like that.
Right.
No, we didn't.
So we think we've got a better plan.
We did not.
Well, I would say that those are the only two substantive changes to the plan at this point. I would say that those are the only two substantial changes to the plans at this point, would be the relocation of the access point and the relocation of the HVAC units. We've subbed in some amenities for other amenities, but I think that the amenities that we have now are basically of equivalent value to the amenities that we had in 2020.
So, Bill, can I ask you, Mr. Huddleston, can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
And you're not going to like this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So if we eliminated one unit from each structure, would you have the width then to be able to put the units in the back, just like any other townhome development that we've seen?
No, you'd still be having to put them on the side, and then you're having to cross ownership to get to them.
Why would you have to put it on?
Why?
Yeah, I don't understand. Why?
Well, it's
Back to what Holly was saying earlier.
But if they're in between the garages.
No, he's saying all at the one end.
Okay, but what if we put them in, what if we, yeah.
The other option that staff looked at, and I know that you won't like this answer either, is where we've had one-car garage alternating with a two-car garage, then you have enough space on the back side of the unit. But in looking at all of the Planning Commission minutes on this particular one, and you also looked at it in September of 2020, that looked at some reduction of parking. Planning Commission didn't want to go down that route, but we see townhomes accomplishing HVACs in one of two manners. One, they don't have attached rear parking, which usually means that the HVAC is sitting on their patio. Patio is usually tucked under the back side of the building. Or we see them roof-mounted. And then if we have these HVAC parking directly in back of the house, the only way I've seen it accomplished is you have to have enough building width that is not parking to accommodate that. And I think the issue you all had last time is if you fit it in that 3-foot striping area, is that the concern was somebody's going to hit it and you're going to have lots of damaged units. And we thought that Planning Commission had a valid point when they discussed that previously.
All right, what if you cut one unit out of each building but kept the footprint the same? So in essence, the ones that have 7 units in the front would be 6 units but the same width, so each unit would be higher square footage. Then you would have more linear footage on the back of the building to put a unit, where you're not necessarily cutting any square footage, you're just cutting a unit.
Yeah, I think that's what you're spreading out in that same space.
That's what I was trying to say, but I didn't do a very
Yeah.
good job of it.
Wouldn't that make the parking look better, too?
Yeah, it would make the whole unit look better, but it would also make the unit substantially more expensive because they're going to be higher square footage.
Substantially more.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
I mean,
That's what I was going to say. I mean, the goal-
Proportionally more expensive.
yeah.
Yeah, I think we have a gross misunderstanding of economics, though, to say that it would be way more expensive.
It would be way more expensive. I mean, probably 25% more expensive house.
But the bottom line is, we don't have to just squeeze into the space just because it's going to be more expensive. We don't have to squeeze
Right.
an extra unit in because, yes, it's going to be more expensive. You can only, yes, it will be more expensive. There's no question about that. Doesn't mean we have to put another unit in there just to make it less expensive so we can have, it just doesn't mean we have to do that.
Well said, Ms. Jones.
It's just forced.
Yeah.
Mr. Halliburton asked me a question. He said I wouldn't like it. I was okay with it. Now I'm going to say something you may not like. And maybe I'm asking legal. If we're meeting all the requirements, you do. You do have to pass it. This isn't a PRD. We're within the zoning regulations. We've worked with staff to meet the site planning requirements. We need to offer that.
You guys, if the striping is still a significant issue, we could do a 3-foot concrete curb between each unit.
No,
to delineate.
just where those where those hashings
Yeah.
are.
So you could do concrete?
We could do a concrete island there.
Okay.
Wouldn't have landscaping in it, but it'd be a concrete island, so it'd probably look better.
It would. Thank you, Mr. Huddleston. Is there a response from Mr. Ives, though, on the legal side of things?
Yeah, I didn't realize this was not a PRD.
This is a straight
zone.
zone. It's actually zoned RM16. We're zoned at 16 units per acre on there.
That was, I mean,
Chosen
that was.
not to do a traditional apartment.
You kind of boxed in on this.
Yeah.
Because it's got previous RM16 done. I do like the idea of more affordable, even at that dollar amount, it's not that much more affordable. So affordability is relative.
Relatively more affordable. Yeah.
Proportionally more affordable.
There's a lot of site plan approval without studying every element of it.
Well, thank you for getting rid of the striping, if you're willing to do that. I really appreciate that.
My response is that I'm not prepared to opine on, Planning Commission has a significant amount of site plan
Deference, yeah.
review and approval. And without, the checklist for site plan approval is fairly long. And I don't think I want to sit here today and say that you have to approve this or that there's not something in there that you have some discretion whether you approve or not. So if that's the last question, I can't answer it. We will certainly, if that's an issue that you want us to look at, we'll certainly study it and give you an answer at our next meeting, but I don't think it's something that we can take a 5-minute break and study and answer today.
I got another question for the HVACs. Instead of crossing inside the units with the copper and electrical and thermostat wires, what if you buried them, whether under the ground or in the concrete slab or something like that, where they're not crossing interior-wise in the units, but crossing subterranean?
I think that you still run into the same problem with the systems crossing across property lines. Even if they're subterranean, the property lines go down in there.
Well, not necessarily. In most townhome communities, all the grass is community property.
I think what he's saying is crossing the vertical property lines.
This is an HPR, so you own the land under your unit.
So you're saying it would go under the unit? Okay, sorry.
Mr. Ives, if we deferred this, could you get us an answer on the legality if we had to approve it or not approve it by the next meeting?
Yes.
Motion to defer.
Second.
Motion to defer and a second. All in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
See you soon. All right.
And just for
Okay.
Mr. Neal and Mr. Huddleston's, just for their information, the next meeting is October the 5th at 6 p.m.
Thank you.
It's on my calendar.
Okay, our next item will be Bellwood Baptist Church parking revisions, site plan for parking lot modifications in conjunction with the adjacent Lytle Creek Commons development on 15.
Y'all should just defer that one, too.
Motion to defer.
Second.
It's going to have to be deferred too.
Motion and a second.
Doesn't do any good to approve that one.
And you can pretend I read the whole thing. Motion and a second. All in favor, state aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Very good. New business. We have one item to discuss here, and we will schedule a public hearing on this. It is a zoning application for approximately 10.1 acres located at 694 and 708 West Thompson Lane to be rezoned from RS15 to PRD, Cherry Blossom Downs. BA Homes LLC is the applicant. Ms. Green.
Good afternoon. Our only item of new business this afternoon, or at least I think it is for you to consider scheduling a public hearing for an application the Planning Department received for 2 properties located north of West Thompson Lane. The properties are shaded blue on the map on the screen before you. Both parcels together are approximately 10.1 acres, and they are unplatted property, meaning there's been no final plat for the property. The properties are located in Murfreesboro city limits, and they're zoned RS15 in that single-family residential district. They were zoned RS15 when the property was annexed. A portion of the property was first annexed in the 80s and the remainder in the 90s. At that time, they were zoned RS15. Here's an ortho photo. You can see that adjacent to the property on the west side is the Tuscany PRD, which are single-family detached homes. And then on the west side, this map, for some reason the zoning labels aren't there, are they? But on the east side here is King's Landing, which is also a PRD, and it has a mixture of townhome and single-family detached lots. To the north is a property that's in the unincorporated area of Rutherford County, and just to the north of that parcel is some property owned by the city of Murfreesboro and zoned RS15. Across West Thompson Lane is all those properties are zoned RS15, which is single-family residential district, and the Northside Baptist Church is across the street, which is the location where the applicant held a neighborhood meeting to introduce this project to the neighbors. The application we've received is for this property to be rezoned to PRD, Planned Residential District, and the name is Cherry Blossom Downs PRD, so there's a program book in your packet with the information for the proposed rezoning. The developer would like to, let's see, go to a page, develop this property with all 0 lot line residential dwellings. Initially, he expressed a desire to do duplexes, or something that was age restricted. However, the direction he's gone is to no longer age restrict the property and to develop this property 0 lot line residential. There are 2 proposed detention ponds along West Thompson Lane, and staff has talked to the design representative for the developer and asked for them to minimize the effect of the detention ponds along West Thompson Lane, as that's something that's not really allowed in our design guidelines. And Mr. Taylor has assured us that he could do something more in line with what Tuscany has, and if you drive by, you don't even see those detention areas, and so that it'll fit within the character and context and meet our design guidelines. This development has 52 dwelling units and each of the units are zero lot line, which means they have one common wall where they're attached. They do own their lots in their building. Our zoning ordinance has a whole section on zero lot line developments. In the past, those were zoned RZ. When we updated and revised our zoning ordinance to separate townhomes from the multifamily section, because for all of Murfreesboro's existence, we called townhomes multifamily, but several years ago, we changed the terminology to call it single-family attached to separate that identity from traditional apartments. We also renamed zero lot line developments. So technically, they're RSA Type 1, and really the only thing that changed was the label from zero lot line to RSA Type 1. RSA Type 2 is a suburban townhome, RSA Type 3 is an urban townhome. So that chapter on zero lot line developments was developed many years ago when the city used to get applications frequently for zero lot line developments. Based on the density and the layout, there are additional standards that they have to meet. And so staff asked the design team to compare this project with the standards that are in the RZ or RSA Type 1 development. Some of the things that the RS, or the zero lot line development section of the zoning ordinance, which is section 33, require is that each unit be served with separate utilities, that they front on public right-of-ways, the front yard have a minimum 50% grass or landscaping, that the detached structures provide an easement, a minimum of 3 feet on either side for maintenance. The area of the easement is to be free and clear and not to place anything in there that would prevent access. Also, the Section 33 requires streets in these type developments to have 50-foot right-of-ways with a corresponding 36-foot wide street width. And some of this has to do with the fact that the increased density, the small lots, increases the number of driveways and conflicts with parking. So you'll have, of course, driveways, you'll need places to park on the street and within the development. The zero lot line standards also require there be a physical separation of the roof plane of attached dwellings, so the two units that are physically attached have a separation in the roof. We asked the representative or the design team to provide 4 or 5 different renderings showing what could go on this property. Today we have this one rendering which has been revised a little bit to add a break in that roof line. But we know that with the adjacent Kings Landing project, when it went to Planning Commission, or when it went to City Council from Planning Commission, one of the reasons Planning Commission deferred it, or City Council, one of the reasons City Council deferred it was so that additional renderings could be provided so that you can see the different colors and context. We don't believe that the developer wants to build the same building in the whole development, but just knowing that that was a comment adjacent, we wanted to bring it up as something that you might want to consider with the review of this project. A hot topic to all who live nearby is Thompson Lane. West Thompson Lane is a state highway. The state, Tennessee Department of Transportation has identified it as a committed project to be upgraded to 5-lane street section. There's a report that you can find on TDOT's website that provides some of the information. It's been difficult for me to pin any engineer down, either city, private, or state, as to when that project is going to move forward. I get a little bit different answer with each time I ask the question. What I do know is they're still acquiring right-of-way. For example, Mr. Taylor shared that of these 2 parcels, TDOT acquired right-of-way from one of the parcels, but hasn't got it from the second one yet. So I know that's happening, and usually TDOT's budget can give you an indication of when something's going to happen. I think other than being told the project will probably take 4 years to complete, we really don't have a definitive commitment other than it's going to happen. Of course, the right-of-way that's not been transferred to TDOT, this developer will be required to do. In that same vein, the adjacent Kings Landing PRD is installing a turn lane. If that's not in before this development comes online, this development will be responsible for constructing it. We had them add that language to the program book. The development also includes a connection to an adjacent property to the north. You can see that here, to add a potential cross-connectivity in the future. It also connects to the adjacent Kings Landing PRD. Tuscany is made up of private streets, and there's no clear way to connect the properties as they are today. When the developer originally reached out to planning staff, one of the things we asked them to do, because we've seen this as a repeated opportunity on Thompson Lane, is to look at the street design to avoid what we affectionately call racetracks, but to look at the street network within the proposed development to avoid long linear streets perpendicular to West Thompson Lane, as these streets can create opportunity for the city to manage speeding traffic within a residential neighborhood. And in our planning literature, we read that it's more efficient to manage traffic speeds with street layout and design rather than speed limits. So wider straight streets just put something inside you that make you want to go faster. So that's something that we asked Mr. Taylor to address. And then, of course, the streets in here, they're proposing to meet the minimum standards. When it comes to comparing this project to the future land use map, our staff has been basically writing two descriptions, one for the future land use map that we have today and one for the proposed that we have existing. So the existing future land use map, the map is kind of small, does call for suburban residential character for this area. A suburban residential development are all single-family detached. They have lot sizes on the smallest at 10,000 square feet, but then can range up to 15,000 square feet. Densities can vary, but they range from 1 to 4.5 dwelling units per acre. This project is 5.1 dwelling units per acre. And then, of course, the suburban residential character does allow smaller lot sizes. However, if you do smaller lot sizes, there should be the addition of open space, not devoted to helping maintain that suburban character. So the future land use map, the existing future land use map is not consistent with the rezoning. And then with the development type, because it's attached housing, and with the density. The proposed future land use map identifies these properties as auto-urban residential, which is a little different than suburban residential, in that it's similar in that they're both primarily detached. Single-family detached housing is the type of development that's allowed there, but auto-urban has an opportunity for you to include integrated single-family attached. So the proposed plan says that, yes, single-family detached should be the primary development type. However, you can incorporate townhomes or single-family attached or zero lot line or triplexes if they meet certain criteria, and that's a 20% maximum on the developable area and a 40% maximum on the unit count. And then, of course, there is an emphasis on strong connectivity throughout the development. It says that this should have a strong amenity package with active recreation areas that serve all age groups, including amenities such as playgrounds, pools, multimodal paths, clubhouses, neighborhood recreational opportunities. So with both those future land use maps, the proposal is not consistent with either of them, but I did want to take the time just to explain the difference between them both. The Cherry Blossom PRD has a minimum lot size of 5,200 square feet. Each dwelling unit is a minimum of 1,450 square feet. Has 2 bedrooms, 2-car garage, 2-car front entry garage, and is proposed to have a homeowners association responsible for maintaining common areas. Mr. Matt Taylor prepared that PRD book for you to review, and so he'd like to present that to you. Planning Commission, we're asking you to schedule a public hearing on the matter. The soonest that you could have one would be October 5th, if you so choose, and also to provide any feedback on the program as it's outlined before you today. Before Mr. Taylor comes up, do you have any questions from me?
Any questions? You said they took the 55 and up off of it? or it can still be 50?
This is not age restricted. There's a term where it's set age targeted, but I encourage Planning Commission usually to disregard that term because it's really just marketing. It is not age restricted.
Okay, that's what I want to know.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Matt Taylor, the applicant, Mr. Brian Burns, is back here as well. I don't have necessarily a formal presentation. I think that Margaret Ann did a good job summarizing the project. What I would say is it is age targeted, just like Tuscany was. And, you know, this is a similar density to Tuscany. I think Tuscany was right at 5 units to the acre when we did that back in 2014. And this is just over 5 units to the acre, so a very similar density with that. As Ms. Green said, we have committed to making sure our detention areas are screened. That is at our front door. We've proven, you know, how we can make that look next door. We'll do the same thing here as well. We have introduced curvature to the street to aid in that slowing people down, as Ms. Green indicated. So we work closely with staff on that. I think the only standard that I can think of inside the single-family attached that we don't meet is the 36-foot of pavement, and I think that flies in the face of adding curvature to the street. So if you don't want people going fast, don't add another 12-foot of pavement. And those standards specifically do not apply to the PRD. That is specifically stated in the zoning ordinance. We have tried to comply with all the others, and I think that we do. So as far as compliance with the comprehensive plan or future land use map, we think that those we think this is a good transition between what you see at Tuscany, which is all detached but a higher density, over to King's Landing, which is a mix of detached and townhomes. And so you've kind of got this intermediary use with all single-family attached, but just set up in pairs. So we think that's a very good use, and we've built our amenity package based on who we think is going to live here, which is going to be that older crowd. And I'll say Tuscany, we had a neighborhood meeting. I think they were basically the only people that showed up. And we had, I don't know, maybe a dozen people. I think there was one lady probably there that was under 55. And so I obviously did not ask ages, but she may have aged as gracefully as Miss Jones, but and been over. But we'll add a few more colors of the architectural elevations. We'll have those before the public hearing as well.
Mr. Taylor, how did the neighborhood meeting go? Because I've actually had a lot of calls from people who live in Tuscany about this development.
So a couple of things that we heard come out of the neighborhood meeting was that they felt like it was too dense. We tried explaining that we were essentially the exact same density as they are. Sometimes you can't explain math. And then there was a lot of conversation about Thompson Lane. And so, which obviously none of us in this room control that, but we did try to explain that they are purchasing right-of-way, which is usually a very good precursor for construction starting a couple years down the road, maybe sooner than that. I know they've been working on right-of-way for at least 2 years now, if not 3. So, but they have a lot of tracts to purchase through there. And
is this one of them?
So we have 2 parcels here. One of those, the previous owner had already sold to TDOT. It was, I don't know, a couple hundred square feet, I think, along their frontage. I think they got about 4 feet off their frontage. The other parcel, for whatever reason, had not, I don't find any documents that that's closed. And so if we need to donate right-of-way whenever we get down to it, then we will. It could just be that TDOT decided they didn't need the right-of-way on that property. I don't know the reason behind that, Mr. Halliburton.
Okay.
But either way, we'll make sure TDOT's made whole across our frontage.
And just for my kicks, tell us what amenities that you are including? I mean,
So we've got an active area toward the rear of the subdivision. There, we're doing a pavilion, some community fire pit, bocce ball, cornhole. That's also where we've planned our kiosk and a visitor parking lot at that same location as well. So very geared toward, it's not high activity, not high energy, but more passive gathering type spaces.
I'll have to say, I think I understand that all the calculations say that the density is quite, the same or close to Tuscany. Just looking at it, I can't, it just looks like there's so much more open space in Tuscany. I realize all the buildings in Tuscany, they're all built very close together, I understand that. They're all single-family homes as opposed to the attached single-family here. I will tell you, I'm not a fan at all of the architecture that you have right now, so I'll just go ahead and tell you that. Whether you want to change it or not, I'll tell you again at the meeting if you want me to, but I don't like the look. I don't think it, I just don't, I'm struggling with it. Density and the look, so anyway. That's where I am.
Mr. Taylor, was there thoughts to actually making it deed restricted 55 and up, or was it always just straight targeted and that's it?
I might let Mr. Burns address that. We did talk about it. I think we talked about it with staff. I know we talked about it internally, but at the end of the day, you might lose a couple of buyers, or it will be geared, it will sell toward that 55 plus, but what I saw in Tuscany, what I've been told by Landmark Homes who developed Tuscany was, most of the people there are 55 plus, but you do have maybe that single mom that moves in there that is essentially the same thing, who maybe has that older teenager who doesn't want the yard to maintain, so did not want to cut that market out.
Yeah.
Brian Burns with BA Homes. I originally was going to do it age restricted, and then when I got to looking at General's Landing, the inn units, these were basically the inn units from General's Landing. I had people that ranged from their mid-90s to probably no younger than 70 that bought those. And we also had a few people who had handicapped people, so I didn't want to. These have no steps in them at all. These are all down, no steps. Essentially, I don't know, I didn't see a reason to put an age restriction on it.
That's fine, I was just wondering.
And I take it this is all hardy board? Is it hardy board, or is it, what is it?
We do have a water table around the entire building, and then it's all cement board above with a vertical board and batten in those upper eave type areas.
And I realize the side elevations, not anybody's going to see them, I guess. Except on the end units, but they ought to, on the end units at least, look something a whole lot better than what we're looking at right here.
I can make the end units look much nicer if the
cable department could put up my screen on the planning commissioner screens.
I'm sorry, was it me?
No, it's not you.
I try not to touch anything. We can make those. They were, like they're saying, being 10 foot apart, the sides. I didn't put much effort into those, not having upstairs to them. These, we are going to put fences on all the backyards so people can have a place for their dogs. We're trying to make these more like houses than townhomes. I built a lot of townhomes, but I just thought this would be a better spot for this. And there's a huge demand for all-down product.
I bet.
that's moderately affordable, I guess.
Mr. Burns, where do you see the fence going?
We're going to fence in the rear yards, right up to the drainage areas. It'll go to the houses themselves.
Okay, so back, not necessarily like a side situation?
No, it'd be backs. And then in between the units, we'll put a privacy fence, so each yard is private between the units.
Oh, perfect.
That's the reason we didn't do grilling stations and things like that. Nobody's going to walk up the road and grill a hamburger when you got a back porch. We wanted these to have back porches on them. We had some issues at General's Landing with the units, the patios come out the sides, and then when people wanted to screen them in and stuff later, the codes had a problem because they were too close together. So we changed that around to make sure these all come out the rears. But I can dress them up a little bit more, Ms. Jones.
I know you can.
They'll be lit
I
up
hope
nice
you
and
will.
pretty. We'll have them landscaped pretty. We're going to really we're going to throw a lot of stuff.
Can you do a fire NATO outside of the...
Do not. I make no promises on Farnadoes.
I want a fire NATO at my house.
I like the concept. I mean, I have family members now that could really benefit from something like this, multiple family members, so. But I think Chairwoman Jones is correct. The side elevation leaves a lot to the imagination.
On the end units that's going to face any streets, I will find a new side elevation for you. The ones going down the streets, I'll probably leave alone if that's okay for you guys.
I really don't have a problem with that. Nobody else is going to see it.
Plus you're going to, well, no, you're not eating nothing.
Once again, we're going to landscape it to the hill. We're going to make sure it's lit up. It's going to be lit up at night. The timers will come on automatically where people can't turn their lights on and off, just like General's Landing and General's Run and all the other projects we've done.
You did say there will be multiple elevations to the fronts.
2 elevations, 4 color schemes. So most of the units, just like General's Landing, will be the same buildings, but it will be different. We're going to have 2 different color schemes. We're going to have the white on the gray and the gray on the white and try to alternate them down through there. I don't want to get too many or it just starts looking busy going down the street.
Can you pull it back up, Matt or Brian?
I'm letting him. One of the things we talked about was putting like a wooden pergola above the garage doors. I love the way those look, but the problem is later on is all that wood stuff's got to be upkept. And one of the things I did at General's Run, the first project, was I did a lot of stuff out of wood fences, wood shutters, and it was a nightmare. In General's Landing, we corrected it we just did hardy board and painted it brown, and everybody thinks it's wood.
Get that wood from Firebird.
Yeah, I don't know if I can afford the Firebird wood.
They promised us it would last forever, so.
I don't know if I can.
And then put a fire NATO on each porch.
So you're saying...
Even the garage doors aren't wooden garage doors, they're metal garage doors that are simulated to look like wood. So I'm trying to make them as maintenance-free as possible. The only things that's really wood on there is the shutters and the corpels and the edges.
So this is one of the color schemes?
Yes, and I was going to reverse that color scheme on the next building and keep reversing them every other building.
Okay.
These products, you can only make a one-story unit looks, you can only put so many things on it, so a lot of it has to be the landscaping you put with it, the lighting you put with it. Like a crepe myrtle just does wonders in front of one.
I make a motion, we set a public hearing on October the 5th. Second.
Motion and second. All in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Next, we have staff reports and other business. We have the consideration of the 2023 plans review and 2023 Planning Commission meeting calendars. Mr. Blomley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, Planning Commissioners. We've got 2 calendars to approve today, so 2 separate motions. If y'all concur with what staff has presented to you, there is the Planning Commission meeting calendar, which has our evening meeting and our afternoon meeting for calendar year 2023. And then there is the 2023 Plans Review Calendar, which is much more detailed, and that's what Mr. Taylor and the other civil engineers pay attention to for all the various dates in our cycle. So tried to just model it after this year's calendar. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Can you bring it on the screen?
Sure. Well, actually, Greg's going back there.
There we go.
That's the plan review calendar, and it has all of the dates and deadlines for when our staff comments are due, and that's what Matt and Bill Huddleston and all the others rely upon. And then the actual meeting calendar. Once again, tried to move the July meeting to the second Wednesday of the month so as not to conflict with July 4th holiday plans. Move the January night meeting to the second Wednesday of the month so as not to conflict with the New Year's holiday plans for folks. So modeled it just after this year's calendar.
Could we model the October meeting where it's not on fall break, so it doesn't conflict with fall break plans?
Fall break, we made sure that there were no conflicts with spring break, but the 2023-2024 school calendar is not published yet, so we couldn't.
Yeah.
Okay.
We can always revisit any dates in this calendar if we need to.
Need some place to start, so if we could have a motion on the 2023 Planning Commission meeting calendar.
So moved.
Second.
Motions and seconds. All in favor state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And then we need a motion on the 2023 Plan Review Calendar.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
And Madam Chair, just for, and thank you for the approvals on those, by the way, just for clarification for Mr. Taylor and Mr. Burns, you did want to see multiple elevations in the pattern book for the Planning Commission meeting, public hearing, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Dressed up versions, too.
Yeah, and more than just the one elevation.
Well, I don't have to do it, so.
Let me make sure I understand, we're doing different color schemes, and we're not changing elevations. Is that what?
I thought I heard you say you had 2 different elevations with 4 different color schemes.
No, I got one elevation, I got those 2 buildings, and I'm alternating the color schemes going down through there. I think that's what it said, did I not say that? Okay, sounds like I'm coming up with some more plans real quick, huh?
Okay, we have one comment here.
So, it's not on that. It's on Firebirds Wood. So, from my standpoint, I'd like to understand, well, one, just to be clear, so that we don't get a whole bunch of plans up with the Firebirds Wood as the main siding. The Firebirds Wood should be viewed as accent, unless you guys think differently. I just want to be clear on that, because I don't want a whole bunch of plans to come up and say, hey, these guys approved Firebirds Wood for this, and they're okay with it for everything.
The zoning ordinance would have to be changed if you would allow that as a primary material. The zoning ordinance is specific about what's primary and secondary materials. It doesn't say about materials beyond that. Primary has to be brick, stone, or rock. Okay. Secondary can be integrally colored split-face block, cementitious siding, and ephes, or real stucco. And that would have to change, the ordinance would have to change for that to change. Okay. But when people present new materials that aren't used before, or materials we don't typically see on buildings, ask the Planning Commission to consider the appropriateness of it. It could not be a primarily that wood, the thermo wood, because the zoning ordinance is an ordinance which has a different weight than maybe design guidelines do, or practice. Like our practice is striping on canopies isn't more than I think it's 7 inches. It's not in the zoning ordinance, but, so that could change. But the primary material cannot change without an ordinance amendment being reviewed by Planning Commission and approved by City Council.
And that brings me to my second question, which, or not question, but comment, and you guys can chime in if you want. But it's kind of hard to assess something as new if we're just hearing about it as new. So maybe if they come with more data, then we could assess it better, meaning the wood versus, and I bring this up because previously we had that new clad come up, you know what I'm talking about?
The Dave and Buster thing.
Yeah. It's hard to assess it without some data to say, hey, you know what, because right now, we're just believing what those guys said. There's nothing behind it that said this stuff won't do something different 2 years from now.
And I think with the data, we would still be relying on what they say. I have a very specific comment in there that says the Planning Commission will need to review this. The architect needs to come prepared with the materials and describe it and present to Planning Commission. And I shared that information, I think, with Planning Director, Assistant Planning Director on what to provide to you all, because it's not something that's within my abilities to do, and so I have to rely on the professional to do it. And did you have Mr. Knight?
No, I'm not asking you to warrant or anything like that. I'm just wanting them to come with something more concrete that says the manufacturer has a warranty, or the manufacturer has something that says, other than this guy saying, you know, my owner said that he likes it and he'll pay more for it. You understand what I'm saying?
Commissioner Warren, Madam Chair, and we've also started bringing in different material manufacturers to staff also, so that we can actually start looking at the very same thing to see when we're introduced with something new that we're actually doing our own homework, so we actually will be able to share with Planning Commission a little bit more background on the actual material. So as far as metal, different types of siding, and we'll keep looking and figuring out how we can bring in different manufacturers for more education.
And I'm saying, I think it's a good thing that we're looking at different stuff. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just wanting to make sure that we're not making a decision where we're saying, okay, and then 5 years from now, we look at it and say that was a bad decision because we didn't have enough data.
Yeah, and we do it on the review end, so we can see what we can provide you guys as well.
Thank you. That's it.
Okay. All right. Any other business?
Not for me.
We stand adjourned.